Chapter 35 The Tian family. The Marquis of Xiangqing, Tian Jin-ku, wasn't yet 50 this year. His personal conduct was sincere, but he wasn't inflexible. He had a good reputation in Jing City. Chang de Gong Fu was probably the only entity he didn't like in the entire city of Jing. By now, there wasn't anyone in Jing City that didn't know Duan Wang Fei was close to her relatives in Xiangqing Ho Fu, and treated Xiangqing Ho Fu like her own maternal family. Due to the fact that what the Duke of Changde had done really wasn't something to be proud of, there were some that praised Tian Jin-ku for being so loving. Not everybody would care for a niece that didn't even have a mother. Karma was real. See how Duan Wang Fu had distanced itself from Chang de Gong Fu, this was karma. Today was the Tian family banquet. After the morning just had passed, the guests started to arrive. Tian Jin-ku took his two sons, Tian Kun and Tian Jun, to welcome the male guests. Just as he was deep in conversation with the guests, he saw the stewards run over quickly to say Duan Wang Yi had come. Duan Wang. Tian Kun looked in shock at the steward. He realized the surrounding guests were gazing in this direction and lowered his voice to ask, "Father, why would Duan Wang come?" Tian Jin-ku waved a hand. "Lao De, come with me to the middle door to welcome Wang Yi. Lao Er, stay here and accompany the guests." Finishing, he walked with great strides towards the outside. Tian Jun looked at the backs of his father and brother. When he turned, he saw all the guests had curiosity on their faces, so he started to divert their attention. He was surprised inside. His family didn't have many interactions with Duan Wang. Was it really that Duan Wang was willing to lower himself for Mimi? Tian Gongzi, is there a valued guest coming? A guest of the same age as him put his hands up in a greeting. Who is it? Tian Jun smiled as he returned the greeting. Everybody is a valued guest. When the person arrives, everybody will have to drink a few more cups. Of course, of course. This person smiled. Even though he hadn't found out anything, but at least what Tian Jun said didn't embarrass him, so he wasn't angry. The others saw that it wasn't likely and they settled down. No matter what, they would see them later. This person might be of high status, but he wouldn't be the emperor. Tian Kun stood behind his father and looked at the large 8-person sedan imprinted with the characters of Duan Wang Fu stop at the gate. He raised his feet to walk outside the door and bowed. This lowly official welcomes Wang Yi, Wang Fei. Qian Chang Xan came up to bow to Tian Kun with both hands raised. He bowed to open the curtain and revealed to Tian Kun He Heng and Chu Qingju sitting together. There was a hint of intimacy between the two. He quickly lowered his head, afraid to look. Biao Xiong, does it have to be so courteous? He Heng held Chu Qingju's hand as they walked out of the sedan. He smiled. We are one family, there's no need to be so polite. Finishing, he held out a hand to let Tian Kun straighten before he walked into the gate with Chu Qingju. Jojo. Chu Qingju gave a very deep bow. She looked at the middle-aged man in front of her. His appearance was proper and he had a strong posture. It was easy to feel at ease with this man. As her uncle, Tian Jin-ku hadn't spent much time with Chu Qingju. He made a motion as to support Chu Qingju and quickly scanned her. He saw that his niece seemed to be living well before he bowed with two hands up. Wang Yi, Wang Fei. Marquis doesn't have to be so courteous. You are Wang Fei's Jojo, so you are Ben Wang's Jojo. He Heng returned a greeting. There's no need to be so polite. Tian Jin-ku smiled as he straightened. In a warm voice he responded, if that is so, then this lowly official can only overlook protocol. Wang Yi, please come with this official. The smile on his face became much friendlier, but his conduct still held to protocol. But even like this, it still allowed people to feel that his attitude was much more intimate. Chu Qingju looked at this uncle of hers. No wonder he was like a fish in water in Jing City. Such conduct, everybody would praise it. It could be seen how important emotional intelligence was. The male and female guests had separate banquets. After He Hing followed Tian Jin Ku and left, Chu Qing Ju smiled at Tian Kuan, who kept 5 paces away from her and turned to get on the already prepared sedan. Watching as the sedan was carried away by heavy labor mamas, Tian Kuan allowed a smile to appear. It seemed as though his sister had a somewhat good life. His family could rest some of their worries. Putting his hands behind at his back, he slowly headed inside. Instantly, the smile on his face grew fainter. The members of the imperial family, their desires and interests changed quickly. Who knew if Duan Wang would always treat his sister this way? He himself was a man and naturally understood those desires of men. What about a man like Duan Wang, who was used to seeing beautiful women? When the sedan came into Ermen, it stopped. Chu Qingju came down the sedan and saw Luo Shi with a young girl standing not far away. She walked a few steps in front of Luo Shi and bowed in greetings. "Good day, Jiomu." Luo Shi and the girl behind quickly returned a greeting before she reached out with a hand to meet hers to observe. "You look thinner. Come with me inside now, this cold period in spring is too strong." All the elders of the world were the same. When they saw younger generations after a long time, they always felt that they had become thinner. Chu Qingju intimately held Luo Shi's hand. "I'm not thin, the entire Wang Fu is under my command. The servants don't dare treat me badly." Luo Shi cared for her like she was half a daughter. Seeing that she was willing to be close to her, she naturally felt happy. Luo Shi patted her hand as she said lovingly, "You have to manage such a large Wang Fu, you must be tired, it doesn't matter how good you eat." Finishing, she started to ask whether the servants were easy to manage or if she had troubles with her residence and food. Her actions were very similar to how Jing Guifei questioned He Hing. Chu Qingju answered the questions one by one. She saw the girl behind Luo Shi kept quiet all this time and inquired, "Jiomu, such a pretty gunyang, which family? She looks so adorable." Luo Shi stopped walking and looked at the gunyang that Chu Qingju mentioned. The girl's face was already crimson. Luo Shi answered, "She's the same year as you, but a month younger. It's appropriate for you to call her Mimi. This is the eldest niece of my maternal family, Wen Yao. In the future, you will spend a lot of time together, so I wanted you two to meet." Wen Yao, Luo Wen Yao. Chu Qingju instantly understood. This was the granddaughter of the Luo family that had been decreed to marry He Ming. She saw that Luo Wen Yao's face was as red as it could get and didn't ask for confirmation, only commenting, "I like this meme." Luo Shi heard her inappropriate words and sighed, "Just a few days, you are even more mischievous." Finishing, she pulled Luo Wenyao over to let them stand right and left of her. "But, you like this Mimi, then I don't have to worry any longer." Chu Qingju understood Luo Shi's meaning. Such a good girl forced to marry a disfavored imperial son. Not every family was willing. The waters of the imperial family were muddy. Her husband wasn't favored, none of her Jolie were simple. If there wasn't somebody there, she would definitely be at a disadvantage. Thinking about it, she let a smile appear on her face. "Aunt, don't worry. I will definitely care for Wenyao Mimi like she was my own." There were 4 Urxifu in the imperial family. But the 3 had to be at odds with each other. If she was close to Luo Wenyao, it wasn't a bad thing. But she hadn't though that the Luo family would actually take this step. It could be seen that they really loved this girl. Luo Wenyao quietly listened to her aunt and Duan Wang Fei talk. In the past, she had heard much about how before Duan Wang Fei had married, she had been harshly treated by her stepmother. Today, as she saw the real person, she felt this was a blinding woman. Each move and laugh full of grace and stirring in her a strange feeling of closeness. People were very easily attracted by people dissimilar to them. Luo Wenyao's personality was quiet and gentle. Her future husband had no conflict with Duan Wang. Seeing the friendliness of Chu Qingju, it was naturally easy to feel close to her. So when they walked into the room, the two of them had started conversing. The elder Luo Taitai, who had been sitting in the room, already expressed a relieved smile as she saw the scene. It looked like this Duan Wang Fei took after the Tian family's personality. The female guests present were close-knit to the Luo and Tian families, so they weren't too formal as they interacted with Chu Qingju. It was just when they heard that Duan Wang had accompanied Chu Qingju that they felt deeply moved. Some detected that Duan Wang Fei came in with a gunyang of the family Luo and understood what was happening. Nobody announced it but only talked about some interesting local events to while away the time. I heard that an able person came to the Five Estates Monastery. He's very skilled at explaining the divination sticks. After the flowers bloom, I will go beg with my family. Isn't the Five Estates Monastery in the Jing suburbs? When are you going? Let's go together to beg for a stick. Chu Qingju heard this piece of conversation and put the teacup in her hand down. The dominant religion in the Long dynasty was Buddhism. The court didn't support any, but the citizens each had their own beliefs. Luo Shi saw that Chu Qingju seemed to be interested in the Five Estates Monastery and elaborated, that Five Estates Monastery is the biggest monastery in Jing, it's on the Baiyun Mountain on the suburbs. The able person they are talking about is most likely spiritual master Xianling. If you are interested, you can go take a visit. Chu Qingju smiled. There's no need. A person's fate is already set down by the heavens. To go divine it, it would decrease the good fortune. She wasn't a resolute atheist, but she did believe that good fortune and luck will decrease with divination, so she wasn't interested in begging for a divination stick. Nobody thought Chu Qingju would say something like this. Luo Shi stared in astonishment before nodding. This is true. Luo Wenyao, listening in, felt her heart jump. She looked with respect at Chu Qingju. With such an open mind, how many women in this world could achieve such a thing? At this time, she felt that the worries she had about her marriage were just she making it difficult on herself. Nothing would be different thinking about things that had already been set in stone. It would be better for her to think how she would live the rest of her life. That was her good fortune. Thinking about this, the stare that Luo Wenyao gave Chu Qingju had a hint of gratefulness, a smile appearing on her face. After the banquet, the guests listened for a long while before bidding farewell. Chu Qingju, when most of the guests had left, finally stood and held Luo Shi's hand as she announced, "Jiomu, I need to return now." Luo Shi was a bit reluctant but had to agree. In the Fu, take care of your body. There's a lot of people you should take notice of. This was reminding her of the Ce Shi, but due to Luo Shi's identity, she couldn't say it. Chu Qingju nodded before she bent to enter the sedan. After she looked again at Luo Shi, she let the servant drop the curtain. Watching as the sedan disappear outside a min, Luo Wenyao exclaimed in a quiet voice, "Duan Wang Fei is really an amazing person." Luo Shi looked at her niece and thought about the days that her niece had suffered through in Changdegong Fu. She sighed. Hopefully Duan Wang would continue to treat her well. You have to remember, for a woman to live well, the priority is to treat herself well. If she could discomfort herself, others will also do so. Luo Shi opened in a meaningful voice, Qing Wang might not have the emperor's favor, but I have seen him before. He has a lenient personality, you don't have to be too worried. Luo Wenyao's face instantly reddened. In the midst of her bashfulness there were a few hints of expectancy. At the main gate of Xiangqing Hofu, He Hing watched as Chu Qingju walked out of the sedan. A hint of a smile appeared on his face, and Tian Kuan, who had been accompanying him at one side, couldn't help but look. He watched as Duan Wang walked towards Biao Mei. Maybe it was that the two had such outstanding appearances, or maybe their smiles were too intoxicating. This scene was very beautiful, but it was so beautiful it didn't seem real. Tian Kun blinked his eyes. Maybe he was thinking too much. Hi, male relative from the female line of the same generation, older. Female relative of the same generation from the female line, younger. Chapter 36 Strife On the 8th day of the first month, the royal court opened once again. The carriages and sedans that moved through the city lessened and peddlers gradually filled the streets again. But just as the court opened, a grand case was pushed out. There was an official who accused Rui Wang of putting out high-interest loans in Jiangnan, of participating with the salt governance and casinos. Once this came out, it instantly caused huge ripples. On the third day, as this incident grew larger and larger, this official suddenly accused Rui Wang of having a guilty conscience and threatening his family. After he finished, under the gaze of the entire court, he rammed himself into the gold-coiled dragon pillar with his head for an instant death. This was akin to throwing water into boiling oil. The explosion rocked the entire Jing city. The emperor was so angry he fainted in the royal hall. For a time, each person in Jing defended themselves, afraid they would be involved. In Duan Wangfu, Chu Qingju flipped through the ever-increasing states of calling cards. She furrowed her eyebrows and ordered, in the future, if somebody asks for a meeting, just say I am sick, and Wang Yi is busy with his duties, not in the Fu and cannot receive guests. At this time, He Qi was locked in conflict with He Yuan. Duan Wangfu didn't need to involve itself. Enough smart officials in Jing should have already found that the dead official was connected with Ning Wang. Ning Wang was also fighting with Rui Wang at this time. Everybody was content to look at the spectacle. Why involve themselves? Mu Jin nodded to show she remembered. Seeing Wang Fei's face was dark, she informed, this morning, people from Changde Fu came. They said that Lao Tai missed you. Chu Qingju gave a disdainful smile. She marveled, when I was at Changde Fu, I didn't see that Lao Tai missed me. To think they would think of me now. She just didn't like the conduct of Changde Fu. Right now, they don't have anyone at court. They just want to use Lao Tai as an excuse to find information. Tell the messenger that I received a cold a long time ago. Now when I get cold, I will get sick. Since the reputation of Changde Fu was already terrible, she didn't mind adding more negativity. Either way, the news that Liang Shi abused the daughter left behind by the first wife was already out there. This is good, it will stop those shameless people from trying to associate themselves. Yin Lu added some smokeless charcoal to the copper lion basin in the corner. She said with righteous fury, Nubi is just afraid if you let them a bit, they will try to paste themselves onto in the future. Chu Qingju heard this metaphor and couldn't help but smile, you're thinking too much. Changde Fu might be shameless but they wouldn't dare rush to fawn. With the Duke of Changde's personality, how could he bear to shame Liang Shi? As to Liang Shi, she didn't want to see her even more. The only person that might sincerely want to have good relations with Duan Wangfu was Chu Lao Tai. But it was a pity she was old and she was no longer the ruler of Changde Fu. Mu Jin looked at Yin Lu, forbidding her from saying what she shouldn't say. Yin Lu was more and more brash recently. Even if Wang Fei was kind, she shouldn't use Wang Fei's favor and forget her own boundaries. Under Mu Jin's stare, Yin Lu knew she broke protocol and quickly shut up, not daring to talk nonsense. Watching the movements between the two, Chu Qingju smiled but didn't speak. Yin Lu's personality was a bit too brash. Letting Mu Jin teach her a bit, it was to prevent her from being harmed by this personality. In Rui Wangfu, He Yuan smashed a teacup with a dark face. He Qi made such a good play this time. Thinking about that official that performed suicide on the pillar in the royal hall, He Yuan felt his anger reach a peak. At what time did he need to threaten a minor official? But now that the incident has reached the point of no return, Fu Wang had to calm the others and actually rescinded his qualification to attend court. Even more, he couldn't leave his Wang Fu. He never was at peace with Lao De, but due to Fu Wang's partialness for him, he had never lost much at the royal court. He hadn't expected that this time he would suffer such a large fall. Wang Yi, this incident is most likely complicated. As to what to do, the most important is to clean up what was going on in Jiangnan, a subordinate persuaded. Now that this has been uncovered and revealed by Ning Wang, the emperor will definitely send somebody to Jiangnan to investigate. As long as there is no proof, then it will still be fine if a few more people die. He actually understood inside that no matter if Wang Yi could pick himself out of this incident, his reputation would be damaged. People usually believed bad news, not good news. When it was time and there was proof that this incident had nothing to do with Wang Yi, in the eyes of others, it was the emperor that wanted to protect Wang Yi and purposefully absolved Wang Yi. In this case, Wang Yi had done these things in the first place. It's fine if a few more people die. He Yuan smiled coldly as he looked at his subordinates. He looked at another subordinate, Gao Duo. Who do you say that Fu Wang would send to investigate in Jiangnan? The retainer called Gao Duo didn't rush to speak because He Yuan called on him. He ruminated for a while before replying, Wang Yi, you are the most favored of the emperor's sons. This to you, it is the biggest factor in your favor. By now, Ning Wang's actions are getting bigger and bigger. This is increasing the emperor's wariness of him. If this one hasn't guessed wrong, the emperor will send Qing Wang and an official that the emperor favors to Jiangnan. Lao Sai. He Yuan raised an eyebrow. Lao Sai is always cowardly and has no ideas. There's no need to worry there. The only problem is the accompanying official. At the royal court now, there are 4 officials that the emperor trusts the most. The first is the Marquis of Xiangqing, Tian Jin-ku, who is also the junior minister of justice. But this man is Duan Wang Fei's uncle, so the emperor won't send him. The second is the minister of defense, Luo Changqing, but this man is Qing Wang's future father-in-law, so the emperor would have even less likelihood of sending him. The third is also the person already responsible as chief examiner for this year's examinations, the great scholar Lu Jinghong. Taking away these 3, the only one remaining is the minister of the right Wei Wenguang. And this person might not be the most able, but he is very perceptive and good at pandering to the emperor's desires. Gao Duo performed a bow and said in a meaningful tone, Wang Yi, all that this one has surmised, all of it rests on the premise of the emperor's partialness for you. He Yuan finished listening and sat in thought on the chair. The franticness on his face gradually calmed. Mr. Gao's meaning, Ben Wang understands. You can all leave. Hearing the change in what Wang Yi had called him, Gao Duo left with a calm expression along the other men. After them came out of Jingyuan. He smoothed the scraggly hairs on his chin and smiled as he bore the jealous stares of the other subordinates as he walked out of the Wang Fu. In the front hall of Tianqi Palace, He Heng and his 3 brothers stood at the bottom. Beside them there were some officials. Maybe it was that the expression on Qing the Emperor's face as he sat on the dragon chair was too ugly, but their faces were one heavier than the other. There were more than 100 complaints from the court to investigate Rui Wang. Even if Qing the Emperor had the desire, he couldn't suppress it. His already old visage became even more ancient. Looking at the sons and officials under him, he said in helplessness, the incident of Rui Wang, Zhen 1, still has suspicions. We shall wait for it all to be investigated before making a decision. Even though everybody knew this was true, but at this time, they couldn't do anything other than shout, Emperor is wise, and start arguing over who to send to Jiangnan. Stop, Zhen has an idea about what you are all talking about. Zhen will send down a decree personally tomorrow at court. You can all leave. Qing the Emperor may have understood in his heart that these accusations were true, but he couldn't bear to punish his favorite son, so he distraughtly threw everybody out. He Qi's face didn't look well as he walked out of the front hall. He didn't look at He Heng and He Ming before he swept away. It could be seen just how angry he was. He Ming blinked at De Ji, who had rushed away, and turned to look at Ji standing by his side as though he was waiting for him. "It's late, us brothers should return too." He Heng's smile was casual. "Sid walk with Ji. Ji first." Hearing this, He Ming politely let He Heng to go ahead. "Us brothers don't have to follow these rules." He Heng patted his shoulder and walked first. But it was unknown whether on purpose or not, but he almost always was walking abreast with He Ming. When the two reached the gate to the palace, they met He Yuan as he came out of a carriage. He Yuan was wearing a jewel blue satin robe. He looked more serious than before, even his face was a few shades whiter. The three performed greetings. He Yuan looked at the two and asked, "Is Ji and Sid preparing to leave the palace?" He Heng was clear inside that He Yuan, at this moment, should be in his fu and not be appearing at the palace gates, but said with a normal face, "Yes, of course." "Then Didi will say farewell first." He Yuan revealed a hint of mirth on his face. Ji and Sid, take care. Sanji, too." Because He Yuan didn't usually pay him attention and suddenly being mentioned, He Ming's face showed a hint of surprise. He instantly smiled and returned a greeting. "Didi won't disturb Sanji anymore." He Yuan nodded and started in the direction of Tianqi Palace with large strides, accompanied by a Taijian. The jewel blue back of the figure seemed a bit fretful. Seeing this scene, when He Heng looked at He Ming, the smile on his face grew fainter. When the two separated to get on their carriages, He Heng patted his shoulder. "CD, take care of yourself." He Ming smiled and bowed with two hands raised in a fist. Ji, take care." Looking at the horse-drawn carriage that was imprinted with the characters of Duan Wang Fu travel out the palace gates, He Ming entered his own carriage. After the curtain was let down, the smile on his face slowly disappeared. His eyes were filled with helplessness and pain. Once he came out of the carriage, and as He Heng stepped into the gate, he saw a paper yuan flying in the sky as he raised his head. His eyes narrowed and he frowned as he looked at Ming He behind him. "Find out who is doing it. In the future, no one in the Fu is allowed to fly such a thing." In the previous dynasty there had been people who used flying yuan to pass messages to the outside. Right now, it was a tense time in Jing. He didn't want spies in his Duan Wang Fu. "Yes," Ming He beckoned to the Taijian behind him. They quickly retreated and competed to use the quickest speed to find the person flying the kite. In Jingyuan, Chu Qingju smiled at the flying beautiful Wan. She turned and remarked to Mu Jin, "Look, isn't there people who use such tactics?" Mu Jin smiled warmly. "Wang Fei is all-knowing." But who was it that was so stupid that they would do such an idiotic thing at this time? Chapter 37. Suspicious Chu Qingju saw the paper kite disappear after a while and said with some pity, "Oh, the weather hasn't turned warm yet, but some already have the leisure time to fly kites. It must be such a refined person." What refined person? He Heng walked in with large steps and happened to hear this sentence. He promised with a thin smile, "If Qing Chu likes it, when the weather turns warm, I'll take you to the estate to play. You can fly whatever you want. It's too tiring to run." Chu Qingju disliked it. "If Wang Yi really cares for me, how about finding a few more chefs for this fu and let me taste all the foods in the world? That's good too. After a bit, I'll take you to the estate to taste authentic peasant food." He Heng pulled her inside and took down his cape to hand to a Yahuan. "Those foods might not be as refined as in the fu, but it has a special flavor in itself. And the dried meat that the estate sent over a few days ago was good." Chu Qingju poured him a cup of tea. After He Heng received it, she then sat down on the chair next to him. I'll let them send some more over. Even if the flavor of these smoked foods is good, but it isn't good for the body to consume too much. You still have to abstain. He took a drink of tea. When he heard what Chu Qingju said, he set down the teacup. Don't act according to your likes only. Hearing this, Chu Qingju smiled and turned to trim a short pine tree. Don't worry, Wang Yi, I won't do stupid things. On the matter of food, the ancients had been experts a long time ago. But He Heng's words, did it have a double meaning? All right, I know you like good food and will control yourself. He Heng felt that Chu Qingju was still smiling, but the mirth had lessened. He could only helplessly change the topic. The person who was flying the paper one in the foo, no matter who, you have to lock them up. Chu Qingju saw his face was slightly stern and slowly nodded. Wang Ye's meaning is, let's investigate before anything else first. He Heng raised his cup again but didn't drink. He looked seriously at Chu Qingju. There is always some people that don't belong to you or me in this Wang Fu. She hadn't thought that He Heng would tell such things to her. Chu Qingju looked at this man in a new light. This person definitely was decisive and ruthless, but he was gentle and elegant normally and lowered people's defenses. Wang Yi is suspicious that this person has other loyalties. There's many ways to attract my attention. This way isn't very skilled. He Heng smiled thinly. I saw that paper one hadn't flown very high before the string broke and it fell outside the foo. This isn't something done to attract my attention. Chu Qingju slightly raised an eyebrow. She had assumed that someone was using this way to attract He Heng's attentions. She hadn't thought that someone would actually use this tactic to pass on a message at this special time. Thinking to there, she gave a shallow smile and pointed out, maybe it's a coincidence. Coincidence, on purpose, it doesn't matter, He Heng calmly spoke, we can't keep this person. The hand Chu Qingju used to trip the bonsai turned askew and cut down an additional branch. She picked up the pine branch with some pity. This pot was another one she had cut into a failure. In her last life, she had studied dancing and later became an agent in the dance circles. At the very least, she would be considered to be nimble in hand and feet, but how did she become a murderer of bonsai? Putting down the scissors in her hand, she turned to wash her hands in the copper basin a Yahuan was holding. As she wiped her hands, she said, these things, Wang Yi can make the decisions. The only thing I can help you do is manage this Hoyuan. He Heng looked at her pale and thick fingers rubbing in the soft cotton and felt that this pair of hands was incomparably tempting. He stared in a daze before waking and praising, you've done very well. After you came, this Hoyang has become much more quiet. Putting the cotton cloth back onto the tray, she motioned for the Yahuan to retreat. Chu Qingju turned to smile at He Heng. She asked, is Wang Yi disapproving of Hoyang for being too quiet? It's not quiet, it's calm. He Heng stood and pulled the person closer to him. I actually like the present state of Hoyuan. Flinging a flirtatious look at the other, Chu Qingju turned and sat down on a chair by the side. It's good as long as Wang Yi likes it. I'm just afraid that Wang Yi thinks there aren't enough beautiful women and is angry at me for not being generous and virtuous enough. He Heng walked to her side and smooched a kiss on her cheek before replying, Ben Wang's Qingju is the most virtuous, able, deferent and intelligent. Reaching out with two fingers to push the other's face aside a bit, Chu Qingju raised her chin and chuckled, Wang Yi has to remember these words. Finishing, she saw the other's face full of smile and, as though it was a great favor, she gave a kiss to his chin. He Heng was so tempted by this move that his heart was trembling. There had been women that kissed him of their own initiative before, but he just felt that only this woman's actions were the most tempting. He wasn't to resist and bent to pull the other into his embrace. Wang Yi, we have captured the person flying the paper one. Wang Yi, what should be done? He Heng had never before felt that Qian Chang Xan was this unperceptive. He took a deep breath before standing and sitting down at the front. Come in. Chu Qingju raised a white and blue-flowered teacup to hide half her face before she turned to smile cheerfully at He Hing. He Hing coincidentally saw the look and his heart was tickled again. He gave a deep look at her, sighed in frustration and helplessness before reluctantly moved his eyes away. Chu Qingju was very satisfied with He Hing's response. She adjusted into a more dignified posture and turned her head to watch as Qianchang Xian come in with a few others. At the very end was two strong mamas pinning a young woman wearing a pink dress. She looked somewhat familiar. When everybody had knelt down, Chu Qingju finally recognized this person. It was Bai Ji, one of He Heng's Tong Fong. She wasn't very clear why Bai Ji had stayed so long by He Heng's side. This person had never competed for attention and had been compliant for such a long time. Was it all an act? She had assumed that people would use she tactics to get favor. It seemed that she was wrong. It seemed, in this fight for the throne, it obviously couldn't be without the role of spies. Her eyesight wasn't far enough. This incident, to her, it was a very good lesson. If she was passing on news to the outside, what was she passing on? She was a minor Tong Fong, what could she have found? He Hing scraped the rim of the cup with the lid, making a slightly ear-piercing sound. But just this movement, it was enough to send Bai Ji into shivers of fright. Ben Wang remembers that you became a Tong Fong 2 years ago. He Hing blew on the surface of the tea, and said in a calm and emotionless tone, the paper one you dropped outside. Ben Wang ordered them to pick it back. Why don't Ben Wang have a good look at that paper one? Ban Ji's face slightly changed but she kowtowed as she pled, Wang Yi, forgive me. Nubi didn't know it wasn't allowed to fly a kite in the Wang Fu. Wang Yi, please forgive me. Disregarding her appeals, He Hing saw Ming He come in with the paper one. When he took it, he saw a simple picture of a beautiful woman. Beside the picture there were 2 lines of poetry. She wore shoes embroidered with delicate designs. What trailed behind was a garment as light as the mist. He Hing looked at the beauty drawn wearing a grand set of clothing, standing at a high place. He gave a soft snort, such a good drawing, such a good poem. Chu Qingju raised her eyebrows as she looked at Bai Ji. If she didn't guess wrong, the drawing was pointing at her. Wang Yi, Bai Ji's expression changed. Nubi hadn't been thinking clearly and forgot to avoid Wang Fei's name. Please forgive me, Wang Fei. Finishing, she started to kowtow repeatedly to Chu Qingju. A difficult expression appeared on Chu Qingju's face and she bit her lips as she gazed at He Hing. You don't have to beg Wang Fei. He Hing slammed the paper one in his hand to the table and ordered icily, someone come. Bai Ji has transgressed against Wang Fei. Drag her into the firewood room. Very quickly, someone came to drag Bai Ji away. He Hing stood and said to Chu Qingju, I have some matters to attend to, wait for me tonight to eat together. Chu Qingju nodded and tied his cape for him. She looked at the shambles of the paper one that had been slammed into the table, this paper one. Ming He, take the paper one and burn it. After He Hing ordered Ming He turned to smile Chu Qingju. He grasped her hand, don't worry. The back of her hand was being gently pinched. Chu Qingju glared once at He Hing. Seeing him turn to walk away, she finally opened, the weather is changing fast these days. If Wang Yi is going out, you have to pay attention to your body. He Hing smiled again at her before leaving Zhengyuan with his procession. Once he was outside, his face was dark as he commanded Qianchang Xian, pay attention to see who will try to get near to the firewood room in the next few days. We would leave any of them around in the future. Qianchang Xian nodded before informing quietly, Wang Yi, Wang Changming has come. To the study, He Heng's face was still heavy. Thinking about the bothersome women in the Hoyuan, a disdainful smile appeared on his lips. When he met Wang Changming, He Heng's face had recovered. Is there any news from that side? Wang Yi, Rui Wang has already entered the palace to meet the emperor. He wants Cheng Wang to go to Jiangnan. Wang Changming's face held joy. It looks like our plan succeeded. Lao San always felt that he was above us other three brothers. He looks down the most at Lao Sai. Naturally he would want to pick a soft target. He Hing smiled coldly. Find a way to spread the news to Ning Wang. With Ning Wang's personality, if he doesn't make a ruckus, Lao San's efforts would be such a waste. Pretending not to hear the secrets between the imperial sons, Wang Changmin switched to say, this subordinate understands. What should be done at Rui Wang's side? Nobody has to do anything. With his personality, he'll do something himself, He Hing responded faintly, we just have to watch. Wang Changming instantly understood and bowed. Wang Yi is perceptive. On the second day at court, the emperor sent down the decree as expected. He ordered Qing Wang and the Minister of the Right, Wei Wenguang, to investigate the incident in Jiangnan and bestowed a gold medal for, as if it was Xinhe. He asked for the two to investigate finally, to prevent those people to mistakenly accuse Rui Wang. These words boldly broadcasted the emperor's attitudes. Many were clear. Even though Rui Wang still couldn't attend court, he was still the emperor's most favored and trusted imperial son. No wonder that person was fearless. A day later, He Ming and Wei Wenguang left with men and horses under the title of imperial envoy. Everyone in Jing sympathized this unfavored Qing Wang. Everyone knew that the emperor just wanted to go through the motions. But if he did protect Rui Wang, this was going to put onto his reputation a stain of protecting villains that would be shown to the entire populace. It could be seen just how unequal the emperor favored his sons. He Qi sat in a tea shop and looked at the procession as it left the city. His face revealed a disdainful smile. After the procession had disappeared, he put down his teacup, and said to the tea scholar that was pouring tea next to him, on the road, find a chance to attack, try to not harm Qing Wang. /N. Chapter 38. The woman in the rumors. In the deep of the night where no one was there, a dark shadow flashed at the corner of the firewood room. Before this person could near the room itself, suddenly several lamps lit up in the surroundings. He looked in surprise and found many people surrounding him. Qian Ye here has waited so many days. Finally caught this rat. Qian Chang Xian held a lamp as he came out of the corner. He looked disdainfully at this servant in the guise of a manservant and raised his hand, bind him up, don't disturb anyone else. The servants rushed in. Before the person could speak, he was gagged, bound and dragged away. Stupid trash, finishing, he spat on the ground. He kicked the door to the firewood room with one foot and looked down at Bai Ji, who was tied and gagged in the corner. He gave a joyless smile and said, Bai Ji Guning, your accomplice has already been captured. Why don't we have a chat and you tell me who let you into the fu? Bai Ji squirmed against the rope on her body, but the ropes were too tight and she could not escape. She glared hatefully at Qian Chang Xian. Free her mouth. Qian Chang Xian took a whip from a person behind him. He slowly whipped it on his palm, his face still carrying a harmonious smile. Bai Ji Gunyang, have you thought what you are going to say? I don't know anything. Bai Ji hatefully turned her head away, not looking at Qian Chang Xian. I just wanted to fly a paper one. Wang Yi has the wrong person. Qian Chang Xian was too lazy to argue with her but only said impatiently, there's not much difference between you saying we're not. But it's such a pity for your old and young in the family, and the newly married sister of yours. How about we give you a crime of poisoning Wang Yi? Wonder what would your family have to suffer? Shameless. Bai Ji turned her head and stared straight at Qian Changxing. What do you want to do? You aren't the first person to praise Ye this way. Qian Chang Xian uncoiled the whip, the smile on his face even more visible. Suddenly the whip dealt a blow on Bai Ji's body. Usually the people who praise Ye like this, by now their teeth won't even be on their body. The pain caused her body to shrink. Bai Ji stated with a white face, Nubi is innocent. Since you are willing to give up on your family to protect your master, then you won't care about your family either, Qian Chong Xian proclaimed cheerfully. Tomorrow, I'll let your family go first. Hopefully when you go down to see them, you can still face them. Tears were streaming down Baiji's face. She covered her wound and chalked out, "It's His Highness Ning Wang that wanted Nubi to pay attention to the movement of the Fu." Except Nubi's status was too low and couldn't pass out any news. A few days earlier, His Highness Ning Wang wanted Nubi to investigate how Wang Yi treated Wang Fei in the Fu. Nubi assumed this wasn't such an important matter and so dared to pass on the news. She wasn't afraid of death but was afraid of it involving her family. "That's nonsense, His Highness Ning Wang is a straightforward and honest person, you can't slander him." Qian Chong Xian disagreed, "Such vile slander, Wang Yi won't believe you." "It's true. A while ago, Nubi's Didi entered Ning Wang Fu for a job. Nubi had no other way and did wrong things. Gong Gong, please investigate carefully, Nubi really didn't pass on any information." Baiji cried as she knelt in front of Qian Chong Xian. "Fine, yay, I don't want to listen to your nonsense." Qian Chong Xian retreated 2 steps, not allowing Baiji to hug his leg. He said in a cold voice, "Baiji died due to an illness recently. Send somebody to give her family 30 taels of silver." Finishing, he motioned for the person to pour the poisonous wine into Baiji. "Thank you Wang Yi, thank you Gong Gong." Baiji trembled as she held a hand and poured down the wine. "No matter what, at least Wang Yi let her family go." Qian Chong Xian came out of the firewood room and threw the whip to one side. He took a handkerchief that a lower-ranked Taijian handed over to wipe his hand, bury the person carefully. At least she served Wang Yi before. People, they can't try to find death themselves. Those that betray their masters, they don't have good endings. Finishing, he left without a second glance. Tong Fong Baiji's death didn't arouse much interest in the Fu. Everybody knew, Baiji died suddenly. Curiosity wasn't allowed in the case of a sudden death. When Chu Qingju heard the news, she was trimming a newly delivered bonsai. She finished listening to Huang Yang before she put down her scissors to order, "Since the person is gone, don't mention the past anymore. Get someone to send something to her family, it is Wang Ye's grace." Since Yihing said Baiji died of illness, then she had to give the appropriate response. Even Yin Lu, who was quick of the mouth, didn't say anything at the time. After Huang Yang left, she spoke with some fear, "She's just gone." "As a servant, you can't have multiple masters." Mu Jin sorted away the scissors that Chu Qingju placed on the table to prevent Chu Qingju from accidentally harming her hand. This way, it was very generous of Wang Yi. This type of thing, it wasn't just a life, it was possible to influence an entire family. Yin Lu didn't argue with the words. To her, all she had to do every day was serve Wang Fei well. She didn't have to think about anything else. She didn't want to think that much either. Chu Qingju propped her chin up with one hand and looked outside in boredom. In these days without a computer or phone, it was boring. She gave a yawn and drawled lazily, "Mu Jin, find a storybook for me." Mu Jin retreated, but after a while, she didn't receive her novel, but Chu Qingju received a flower and gold-printed invitation. The Jin and Princess Royal. Chu Qingju looked at the invitation in her hand. At the banquet, there had been a few princesses and Junju, daughters in the imperial family, most likely daughters of Wangs. One rank lower than princess. But this Jin and princess, she had never met before. If her memory wasn't wrong, Jin and princess was the eldest daughter of Qing the emperor. Her birth mother had died, but she was adopted under the empress. The emperor had also decreed her the title of the Princess Royal, too. She had significant status within the womenfolk, but since she married down to the Count of Beilu, she moved to live in Jingzhou and rarely returned to Jing. The rumor was that the Count of Beilu and Jean and Princess Royal were deeply in love and had one son and daughter. She was the object of admiration from many of the women at court and was the epitome of husband of wife in many people's eyes. But why was she returning to Jean now, at a time that wasn't a festival and to hold a picture-admiring banquet? She looked at the beautiful flowery Shaokai script, 3, on the invitation. The invitation that was sent to the Wang Fu would have been personally written by Jean and Princess Royal. To see a person through their writing. This Jean and Princess Royal was a very talented woman. Personally writing a reply, Chu Qingju waited for the ink to dry before folding the paper. She passed it to Jean Jean, who had been grinding the ink. Get someone to send it to the Princess Royal's Fu. At night, He Hing came to the Jingyuan. When the two finished eating the evening meal, Chu Qingju brought up the matter. He Hing wasn't very close to his Jijia, but he did hear some rumors floating in Jing. 2 days earlier, the Princess Royal came back to Jing. You might have never met her before, but since the invitation has been sent, you can go. Chu Qingju gave him a cup of digestive tea. I already sent a reply. It's just that the picture-admiring banquet is 3 days later. The day after that would be the Lantern Festival. I was just surprised at the date that the Princess Royal had set down. When He Hing took the teacup, he took advantage and rubbed her hand. She glared at him half-heartedly. Has the Count of Beilu returned as well? He Hing shook his head. Haven't heard it. I've just heard that the Princess Royal came with her 2 children. Chu Qingju felt that there definitely had been something that happened. The Princess Royal returning before the Lantern Festival, with her children but not her Fuma. Nothing serious was occurring in Jing at this time. Why was she in such a rush? Was it that this Count of Beilu had done something and let down the Princess Royal? Because in this world, the people that were held as examples of matrimony usually would screw up. This was most likely the supposed, the more loving, the faster you die. If the truth was like this, then it was very interesting that the Princess Royal was returning to the palace right now. Don't think too much. He Hing set down the teacup and reached with a hand to scrape Chu Qingju's nose. The Princess Royal is the most noble princess among my sisters. No one dare offend her. Chu Qingju instantly understood the meaning in these words. If the Count of Beilu really did let down the Princess Royal, if the Princess Royal was so angry and wanted to get revenge, then this Count of Beilu won't have a good outcome. She looked at He Hing. These words might not be actual concern for his sister, but it was very honest. Wang Yi is right, Chu Qingju smiled. I was overcomplicating it. And, since it is already done, why don't you think about us? He Hing moved next to her body and gently bit her ear, like when should we prepare to sleep? Finishing, he pulled on the hairpin in her hair. Instantly, her hair poured down like a stream of water. Chu Qingju smiled at him. What is Wang Yi thinking now? He Hing felt that this stare was like a string, pulling him in. He carried her up in a lengthwise embrace. What I'm thinking, Qingju will know in a while. Chu Qingju laughed out loud into his chest. The second morning, Chu Qingju sat up in the bed. She looked at the scattered clothing on the bed, then at He Hing, who was dressing in front of the mirror before she lazily retreated back into her blankets. Seeing her wake, He Hing said, Today is the Lantern Festival. I'll take you out on the carriage to sightsee. Wang Yi, you have to keep your promise. Chu Qingju flipped around upon hearing this, propping her head up on one hand to look at He Hing. Then you need to come back early. I'll wait for you. I'll certainly return very early. He Hing walked to the bed and bent down to steal a kiss from her lips. He straightened and announced, I have to go to court. If you are tired, sleep a bit more. Finishing, his gaze swept ambiguously over the red marks on Chu Qingju's collarbone. Pulling the blankets to under her chin, Chu Qingju pointed outside and gently gave a snort. Wang Yi, you should be going to court now. Chia is still tired, and won't see you off. Finishing, she flipped around and left her back to He-Hing. He-Hing shook his head as he smiled and his mood was light as he went out the door. Chu Qing-ju slept for almost another 2 hours before lazily getting out of bed. She looked calmly on as the Yahuan cleaned up the clothing under the bed. She sat at the mirror and drew her brows when she said, "Jean Jean, get someone to ask around what's going on with the Princess Royal." Jean Jean bowed and left without a sound. Silently looking at the woman in the mirror, Chu Qing-ju raised the corners of her lips. Chapter 39. The reason that the Princess Royal had suddenly returned to Jing was as Chu Qing-ju had expected. Something had happened. It really wasn't some unexpected incident. It was just an usually good man like the Count of Beilu had suddenly taken a fancy for a daughter of a little official and had wanted to take the person into the foo. Such a person like the Princess Royal didn't even argue with him and crisply sent somebody with the girl to return home. Who knew that the Count of Beilu was so angry he installed this person a mistress, outside. When the Princess Royal found out, she gathered her servants and tore down the residence that the Count of Beilu had outside. Then she took her children with her back to Jing. As to how the Count of Beilu was, the Princess Royal didn't care at all. Chu Qing-ju finished listening to the entire story and sighed. The love between husband and wife, it's just this. The daring that the Princess Royal had, a lot of it was based in the fact that she was the Emperor's daughter, that she was the Princess Royal of noble birth. If it was another woman who met such a thing, even if she left, who would help get justice for her? After Jean Jean recited the story from beginning to end, she whispered, "Nubi has also heard that the Emperor and Empress already know of the incident. The Emperor is very angry and has summoned for the Count of Beilu to come into Jing. A man like the Count of Bei, he hadn't really been in love. He was only wary of the status of the Princess Royal and hadn't met the woman that made his heart move. Now that he met a young and innocent girl, he forgot his wife, forgot his children and forgot his own identity. This kind of man, compared to those womanizers, was there a difference? When He-Hing came back from court, his expression wasn't well. It looked like he also knew what had happened with the Princess Royal. In the future, when you go to the Princess Royal's residence, spend some time with her. When He-Hing stopped, he gave a sigh. This Count of Beilu is too outrageous. Chu Qing-ju pretended to not have known already. What is it? He-Hing instantly went silent for a beat before answering. He let down the Princess Royal. Fu Wang was very angry and summoned him back to Jing. Knowing that he didn't want to go into the details, Chu Qing-ju smiled and said, "It's late, let's eat now." He-Hing glanced outside before nodding. He affirmed, "It's really not early anymore. After we eat, I'll take you out to see the lanterns." He was still thinking about this event and didn't want other people's happenings to affect the mood between the two of them. He then continued, "There's going to be many people tonight. I've gotten someone to prepare a veil for you. It will be good to go for a walk." Chu Qing-ju revealed a smile, "Then let us eat quickly. I still have to change." The clothing she was wearing was beautiful, but it reached the floor and wasn't appropriate to go outside. Knowing that she wanted to go outside, He-Hing smiled and agreed, "Yes." He turned and washed his hands, preparing to eat. The meal started with a small bowl of yuan shao, too. Chu Qing-ju used half a bowl before randomly eating a few other dishes before she started to wash her hands and rinsing her mouth. When He-Hing put down his chopsticks, she stood to go to the inner room to change. Holding a cup of digestive tea, the smile on He-Hing's face grew deeper. Looking at the gradually darkening sky outside, He-Hing ordered Qian Chang Xan and the others to prepare a carriage. Chu Qing-ju changed on a blue-green tight-girdled short dress. She styled her hair into a dowoji. When she came out she saw He-Hing sitting at the side drinking tea. She came forward and asked, "What does Wang Yi think of this?" He-Hing saw the short dress in blue-green that she wore. It was different than the laziness she exuded usually. Like this, she seemed to have more of the lovable nature of a young girl, just like a tender flower but which became water with a pinch. Very good, Hee came forward to pull her hand. Let's go, it will start soon. Sitting on the carriage for a while, she found that it became gradually louder coming from the street as though they had entered a high-density area. But there wasn't anyone who blocked the carriage. The one they were riding in didn't have the symbols of the Wong Fu, but the people who could sit in a two-horse carriage, how low would their status be? After the carriage traveled for another while, it stopped. Hee passed a veil to Chu Ching Ju, almost to the river. Come down with me. Finishing, he got down the carriage first, holding a hand out to her. Chu Ching Ju gave her hand to him, allowing him to help her out of the carriage. She didn't know what the veil was made out of. Even though it seemed that a thin mist covered her view, she still could clearly see everything. Her hand was grasped in Hee's, hidden in the other's wide sleeve. It felt a bit like the first romance between boy and girl as they came out to walk together. But Chu Ching Ju was very clear inside. She wasn't an innocent girl. And the other wasn't a youth in the middle of his first crush. By this time, both sides of the river shore was filled with beautiful lanterns. There were some stalls where lanterns were hung up for people to spend money and guess riddles. If they were right, they would receive a lantern as a gift. Behind the two of them were the Taijian and guards, all in common clothing, who didn't let other people crowd them. Passing through the busy crowds, Chu Ching Ju saw people take river lanterns as they walked towards the edge of the river and some children running around with animal lanterns. In this instant, her mood was very good. What has always been said to come, but has never really came? Wind. Clouds. Chu Ching Ju heard the exchange and couldn't help laugh out loud. Hee saw she was very happy and asked, "What does Ching Ju know?" This, placed in her previous life, it was a brain teaser that would be placed on the winter homework of elementary school children. Of course I know, she turned to look at the people still guessing. It's tomorrow. Hearing this answer, Hee couldn't resist smiling. That's correct. Behind him, he pulled on the veil and made it more secure on Chu Ching Ju. He then complimented, "Ching Ju is very smart." Finishing, he dragged her in front a stall. "Which one do you like?" He pointed at the lanterns hung above them. Chu Ching Ju followed his hand to look up. She pointed to a moon rabbit lantern and commented, "That bunny is very cute." Hee motioned for the peddler to take down the moon rabbit lantern and check the tag hanging on the lantern. It was the first part of a couplet, and asked for the matching second half. Qian Chang Xan saw this and quickly gave money to the peddler to let his master guess the right answer to the couplet. "The rabbit's soul is connected to the silver sea," Chu Ching Ju recited the first line. She wasn't skilled at this topic, and didn't know if Hee could give the answer. She prepared to look at the lanterns hanging elsewhere. "The Crab's Mountain receives the purple star." 3. Who knew that Chu Ching Ju hadn't even seen clearly what was hanging on the other lantern before she heard Hee give the matching line. She raised an eyebrow and laughed, so skilled. Just a simple couplet, Hee took the moon rabbit lamp from the peddler and presented it in front of Chu Ching Ju. "For you." She took this lantern. Chu Ching Ju raised it and looked in examination for a while before replying, "Thank you, Wang Yi." Seeing Chu Ching Ju like this lantern, the smile on Hee's face became even more visible. It was just when he took a few steps, the smile on his face wasn't so natural anymore. Because he saw He Yuan was coming straight over in his direction. Beside him, there was a woman, but she wore a veil that disguised her appearance. It was obvious that He Yuan saw him. The two brothers both stopped in their steps before they walked near each other. He Yuan's gaze swept next to Hee. He took his eyes back. Ge has such good spirits today. Sam D is as well. Hee casually moved to the side, managing to hit half of Chu Qingju's body behind himself. Greetings to Duan Wang Fei. Just at that moment, the female next to He Yuan opened to speak. Hidden under the veil, Chu Qingju's eyebrow jumped. She paused for a beat before questioning, Sanmei. Why was Chu Yusu walking together with He Yuan? What was the people of Changde Gongfu doing? Chapter 40 To repay grievances fairly. 1. Chu Qingju felt that she didn't understand what was going on. This era didn't treat women as strictly as the previous dynasty, but Chu Yusu had just reached her marriageable age of 15. She just casually walked with a Wang Yi that already had a wife on this public street. Wasn't it a bit inappropriate? She looked at the veil that the other was wearing. Her appearance was faintly unclear through the fabric, which would more easily cause others to speculate. She didn't want to involve herself in whatever Changde Gongfu was doing, so in the end she didn't say anything. It is Mimi. Chu Yusu's voice was as sweet as usually and had an extra hint of gentleness. She gave Chu Qingju a slight bow. I didn't think to be able to see Jijia here. She had just called her Duan Wang Fei. After one call of Sanmei, the other instantly changed appellations. In her voice, nothing of the conflict between Chu Qingju and Changde Gongfu could be heard, as though Chu Qingju was just her sister. Just a good festival, so I came out to see. Chu Qingju had no interest to chat in front of two Wang Yi and an unfamiliar woman. She replied coldly and didn't speak further. Chu Wei-su saw she didn't want to speak and casually responded before stopping talking. She clearly was a perceptive person. This series of actions made Chu Qingju feel that it was a miracle that Liang Shi could raise such a daughter. It instantly became silent between the four people. Nobody spoke. Suddenly, a ball of fire exploded in the sky. Chu Qingju raised her eyes to watch. She saw the eye-catching spread of fire as she heard the cheers of people in her ears. Chu Yusu also raised her head, but she only saw the sparks as the fireworks faded. She had no desire to watch, so she turned her head to look at Rui Wang beside her. The other's handsome appearance caused her to slightly blush. Didi has a pleasure boat by the river. How about Ji and Sao come together on to see the river lanterns from there? He Yuan said calmly, it's rumored that the fireworks would be going on for 2 hours tonight. It wouldn't be as noisy on the boat. Ji, you can't disdain the boat for being too crude. Finishing, his face revealed a smile that held a hint of pride. Hearing the other mention the pleasure boat, He Hing knew this boat. It had been commissioned from the Ministry of Work specifically by Fu Huang for Lao San. He had never been on it, but he had heard people mention it. This boat had exquisite carvings all over. Since the other had the desire to boast, he couldn't reject. That's great. Ji hadn't had the chance to see Didi's boat. It's very fortunate to have met tonight. We'll have to disturb you. Finishing, he turned and held Chu Qingju's hand as he explained with a shallow smile, seeing the lights from the river, it has a distinctive flavor. Chu Qingju's index finger scratched his palm and nodded her head lightly. He Yuan looked at their close conjugal state and put his hands behind his back in disgust, moving his eyes away. On the side, Chu Yusu was deeply moved. A person like De Jia who had such a dull personality, she was able to receive Duan Wang's affection. Even her personality was more outgoing than in the past. It could be seen just how great the influence Duan Wang had on her. A sense of admiration rose in her heart, a bit sour and a touch bitter. Changde Gongfu's days were one worse than the past one. So they thought to let her enter Rui Wang Fu. Even if she couldn't become Zheng Fei, but after Rui Wang succeeded the throne, she could at least be a Fei. If she gave birth to a son, she might even have better fortune in the future. She had already accepted that she had to walk such a past, but seeing how De Jia was able to hold hands and walk together with Duan Wang, her heart still felt ill. In this world, which girl didn't want to be wearing a phoenix crown and a red cape as they married? Why did they have to wear that mountain crow dress to become another man's shirtia, and that man, she couldn't call him her husband? The guards at the two sides quickly pushed aside the surrounding crowds, leaving behind enough walking space for their masters. Chu Qingju and He Hing walked at the very front, a feeling akin, a very important person was coming and onlookers had to leave. On the two sides of the road there were peddlers selling snacks. Yuan shao, candy, and other foodstuffs. It had attracted many customers. She even saw a chubby child holding a bowl of hot sesame soup and wolfing it down. These fresh scenes caused her to smile. She pointed to a small stand selling sticky rice cake and commented to He Hing, "Wang Yi, that cake has sesame seeds and peanut bits on it. It seems interesting." He Hing looked at the nondescript stand. The sellers were a normal couple, past their 60s, but they seemed very energetic. "Foods outside aren't very clean, you can't eat too much." Finishing, he motioned for Qian Chong Xan to go by. Qian Chong Xan hurriedly walked to the small stand and gave a handful of copper to the owner. He even brought the bowl and spoon. Then he carefully held the sticky rice cake to He Hing. "Wang Yi, Nukai had them add extra peanuts." He Hing nodded and took the bowl to have a taste. The flavor was normal but there was some distinctive style. He held the bowl in front of Chu Qingju. "Here, if your stomach aches at night, don't blame me. I'm not that delicate." Chu Qingju didn't take the bowl and reached out with her left hand to hold the spoon to eat the cake. Her right hand slightly pushed aside the fabric of her veil in front of her face, totally treating He Hing like a servant of hers. Qian Chong Xan saw the master and mistress walk even slower and silently lowered his head. He definitely didn't see Wang Yi taking pleasure in the act. After a few pieces of cake go into her stomach, Chu Qingju put down the spoon. She took out a handkerchief to wipe her mouth and commented, "The flavor is good. I just saw someone selling tofu, but it's hard to eat and walk on the road. Get the food chef to make it for you." He Hing threw the bowl at Qian Chong Xan and wiped his hands. He declared, "You can only just taste the flavor with these, but they should be more finely crafted." Chu Qingju obediently nodded, acting like, "Wang Yi, you are right. I listen to you for everything." He Yuan, who had been following them the entire road, stayed silent. When he had saw He Hing hold the bowl for Chu Shi, he felt surprise. As one of the imperial sons and descendants of the dragon, they never served anyone else. This Chu Shi had some ability to let Ge be this happy in serving others. No wonder Mu Fei said she was a fox spirit. To wrap He Hing around her fingers, her tricks should be extraordinary. People said to marry a wife was marrying virtue. This wife that Lauer had married, she probably wasn't a very worry-free one. Thinking of this, he raised his head to look at the backs of the two. This type of women, it would be better for her to be a beautiful Chia. They hadn't walked for 15 minutes when they reached the pleasure boat. At this harbor, there was only He Yuan's boat. It even had guards protecting it. The other pleasure boats were anchored far away, clearly afraid to even cause any chance of collision. He Yuan disregarded the guards as they bowed to him and ushered the couple onto the boat. As he led them inside, he informed, "This boat has 2 levels, we'll go to the top." Chu Qingju found that even the handrail of the stairs was carved with pictures of mountains and rivers. The steps her feet rested on were made from high-quality red wood. Each step was as steady as she was walking on solid ground. He Hing walked at the front, carefully pulling Chu Qingju's hand as they went up. Only when they reached the top did he let go. The windows of the boat were open. Next to the window was a set of table and chairs. He Yuan ushered the two to sit, he himself sitting down by one side before he said to the still-standing Chu Yusu, "Chu San Shao Jia, please sit." He knew the idea that Chong de Gong Fu had. He didn't have any interest in this third daughter, but if he took Duan Wang Fei's Mimi as Chia, what would Lauer's face look like? His good Ge was in love with Wang Fei, so he thought he wouldn't be angry at her. Chu Qingju sat beside the window, looking at the surface of the river as it turned red due to the lanterns on both shores. She used a hand to prop her chin as she admired the scenery. Occasionally, there were lotus lanterns that floated by, the candle in the middle fluttering, creating another kind of beauty in the night. In the cold night, a guest has come with such urgency that tea has to substitute for wine. The water started boiling in the bamboo pot, the fire crimson red and hot. He Yuan raised a teacup. Ge, saw, why don't you taste this boat's tea? Chu Qingju heard his words and felt this couple of Rui Wang both had the habit of wanting people to taste tea. A person like her that didn't have much learning in tea, the thing she disliked most was hearing this type of question. She raised the veil, revealing an ivory chin. Chu Qingju smiled as she took a sip and then she lowered her veil, elegantly putting the cup back on the table. Simple and elegant, the taste lingers in the mouth. He put down the teacup and smiled. He praised, Sandy has such leisurely days. Ge can't find good things like this. Recently I don't have to go to court, so naturally I will spend more attention on these things, He Yuan said with a mirthless smile. Ge has busy duties, there's no attention left for these common things. Seeing the other mention the court, He turned his head to look outside the window. He turned his head back to say, Sandy is joking. Fu Wang is just angry momentarily. Once Sid has uncovered the truth, I'm afraid Sandy will be busy with the court again. I hope Sid can return soon, and wash away the accusations again. He Yuan gave a seemingly helpless sigh. He turned and said to Chu Yu-su, who had stayed silent by one side, I've heard that San Xiaojies is exceptional at the qin. Is it possible for this small Wang to hear a song? Under the veil, Chu Yu-su's face froze. After a slight pause, she put down the teacup in her hands. With a light voice she said, and an elegant song, hope everyone doesn't laugh. Finishing, she walked to sit behind the qin. When she plucked the chords, notes rang out. The smile on He Heng's face didn't change, but he looked down even more at the people of Changde-gong-fu. Now, Qingju was Duan Wang Fei. Chu Yu-su, as her sister, was willing to play music for Rui Wang. A daughter of a Gong-fu, she was rushing to become a Chisher. He didn't know if it shamed Qingju or the reputation of Changde-gong-fu. Chu Yu-su's skills were good. Chu Qingju listened and had a deeper understanding of the arrogance of He Yuan. He could, in front of her as his saw, let Chu Yu-su play for him. That was clearly saying that he didn't even put any importance on He Heng and his saw. Arrogant people usually died early. Chu Qingju smiled icily. Just this type of tactics, and he wanted to be emperor. He was delusional. And this Changde-gong-fu, it was too shameless. Thankfully the entire Jing city knew that she, as Duan Wang Fei, wasn't close to Changde-gong-fu. Otherwise, if they didn't care about humiliating themselves, she cared. Chu Yu-su played a famous song called Clouds Over Shao and Xiangjiang Rivers, too. Some thought this was a song lamenting the present and reminiscing on the past, but others felt this song just simply described the scenery. No matter what, this song required very high skills. If there were any weakness, they couldn't play the meaning in the song. Chu Qingju wasn't an expert in the guqin, but as a former dancer, she did have a sense of music. At least she could hear that when Chu Yu-su was playing this song, her mood wasn't as good as imagined. San Xiaoji's skills are as extraordinary as said. He Yuang listened for a while before continuing to drink tea. He suddenly remarked, Saw's skills must be extraordinary as well. These words overstepped. Chu Qingju smiled rather than get angry. The motion she made as she set down the teacup was heavier than before. She retorted icily, Sanshu does indeed have lots of leisure time. No wonder you would pay attention to such insignificant matters. These words were very impolite, it didn't leave behind any coverings for Hyuan. Sitting by her side, Hee-hing didn't speak, clearly feeling that there was nothing wrong with what Chu Qing-ju had just done. Hyuan's face showed an astonished expression. When he had finished speaking, he had already detected it wasn't proper, but he was used to being brash, and didn't expect that this Saw would be so impolite. A flame burned in his heart. He looked at Hee-hing and saw the other's expression wasn't very good. He could only raise his teacup. It's Didi that transgressed. Saw, please forgive me. Chu Qing-ju lazily raised her teacup. Sanshu is too polite. But she didn't drink the tea. A sliver of a smile appeared on Hee-hing's face. He raised the teacup and said to Hyuan, Sandy, this tea isn't wine. Don't get intoxicated. His woman, she showed have this daring. If she had to silently suffer such a thing, where did it put him as the husband? Hyuan squeezed out a smile and took a drink, but he felt that the tea in his mouth was bitter and harsh, the fire in his heart unable to be doused. One is an idiom that states to justly treat people that they hate. Two is a place Hunan /N. Chapter 41. Once, clouds over Shao and Xiangjin rivers finished, Chiyu-su took down her hands and elegantly stood to bow to the three people before she returned to her seat. Chu Qing-ju saw her fingertips appear to be slightly red and her eyebrow twitched. She turned her head to look at the desserts in front of her, and reached with a hand to pick one. Hee-hing looked at the pile of salty pastries on the place getting smaller and smaller and opened to warn, careful you don't get thirsty. Eating this kind of pastries at night, wasn't she afraid of getting fat? Raising her teacup for a sip, Chu Qing-ju didn't eat any more pastries and pointed with emotion at the fireworks blooming outside the window. The fireworks last year must have been as beautiful as today's, but Xia was in the Fu and could only see the light when the fireworks erupted, not how beautiful it was. Hearing this, Chiyu-su's heart jumped. Last year's lantern festival, she and Didi came out to look at the lanterns. Did Jia and Jia had been left behind in the Fu? In the past, she had felt somewhat guilty, but if Jia wasn't present, it was more carefree. Now that she was hearing Jia mention the incident, she felt strangely insecure inside. In the future, you will see the fireworks each year until you get sick of it. He tilted his head towards the windows, the flames painting his eyes red and blurring his gaze. The past, don't place too much importance on it. Finishing, he moved his eyes and kept on drinking his tea. On the side, Hyuan hadn't spoke since he had been flayed by Chu Qing-ju. He clearly was trying to suppress his anger, but to Hee-hing, Hyuan's flames weren't really anything. What was going to happen at the royal court tomorrow will make his fire burn higher. And Chu Qing-ju didn't look outside anymore. The wind blew past her veil, revealing a pale neck that was quickly hidden under the veil. She rubbed the edge of the teacup and remarked to the quiet Chiyu-su, San Mei's musical skills are better and better. Jia is too complimentary. Chiyu-su managed to smile. She knew that the other looked down at her, but she had to keep a respectful attitude, just practiced more during the days. Chu Qing-ju nodded, you usually are much better than I as your Jia. Jia's appearance is among the most beautiful of the country, how can Mimi compare? Chiyu-su stood and bowed, afraid to receive the compliment. It was just that something was off about the words she just spoke. Most beautiful of the country. Chu Qing-ju felt that she was saying she had looks but no education. But she didn't care. Others complimented her beauty, she felt happy. As to whether she had brains, it was fine as long as she was clear. What others said, did it mean anything? In this world, who wouldn't be spoken of, who wouldn't be the object of jealousy, wouldn't be called mediocre? She wasn't afraid of the malicious slander of others. Smiling carelessly, she put down the teacup in her hand. She suddenly observed, there's less and less people on the shores. He Yuan looked outside and saw that it was true there were less people. He remarked faintly, it's late, let the boat near the shore. He didn't want to see Lauer and his woman being sick. As beautiful as the fireworks were, there was a time where it had to stop. The people on the shores gradually left and the busyness turned quiet. As the boat slowly reached the shore, Chu Qingju looked at the lanterns that were hanging by the shore without an audience. She remembered her own moon rabbit lantern that she had let a servant hold. Who's looking after the lantern? Chu Qingju allowed He Hing to guide her down and asked about the whereabouts of the lantern. Don't worry, Qian Chang Xan has somebody keeping a watch. He Hing came down the last step. Seeing Chu Qingju still reluctant over that roughly crafted moon rabbit lantern, the smile on his face grew stronger. There's many lanterns hanging in the fu. After we return, I'll get someone to pick some pretty ones to hang in Jingyuan. Chu Qingju nodded and held hands with He Hing as they left the deck. She looked at the surroundings and found that a thin mist had formed, and it had gotten colder. Waiting at the side, Qian Chang Xan held the two's capes. He first helped Wang Yi put his own. When he was preparing to serve Chu Qingju, he was waved away by He Hing, who personally did it. The soft shoe brocade cape was embroidered with faint flower patterns. Under the moon, it had a hazy beauty. Chu Qingju saw He Hing put the cape on her and lowered her head to tie it, but found He Hing had stolen ahead again. He Hing's fingers had been carefully cut and cleaned. The joints were somewhat visible, giving off the feeling of security and strength. Chu Qingju smiled and raised her chin to allow He Hing to tie her cape for her. Chu Yusu silently stood in the corner. Nobody came up to serve her, no one even looked at her. She watched as Duan Wang lowered himself to tie Jiejia's cape for her and suddenly felt ill and ironic. Nowadays, Jia was high up in the sky, served and fawned over by countless people as Duan Wang Fei. And she had to use all her heart and mind to curry favor with Rui Wang. Even if she was successful, she could only be a Sure. Since it's late, Ji and Sa should return to rest early. He Yuan saw He Hing's actions and stopped. He continued, I should return too. The two carriages had been waiting at one side to take their owners back to their fu. He Yuan finished speaking and headed to his own carriage. Behind him, Chu Yusu hesitated and bowed to He Hing and Chu Qingju. In the end she still followed in He Yuan's footsteps and got on the carriage of Rui Wang Fu. Chu Qingju watched as Rui Wang Fu's carried leave. The smile on her face had a hint of additional disdain. Rui Wang Yi has such an unrestrained temperament. Hearing this, He Hing smiled. He's always been like this since he was young. Because of it, he's gotten into countless conflicts with De Ji. It's just Fu Huang has biasly favored him that after these years, he has gotten more and more of a personality. That He Hing could say the words, biasly favored, it could be seen just how unfair Qing the Emperor was. And He Yuan has offended many. Rationally, an imperial son as favored by the emperor as much as he was, there should be many who followed him to earn a part in pushing him to the throne. But this Rui Wang really didn't have that many people following him. It could be seen that even the officials in the court felt that one day, he would break himself. But, it might be that Qing the emperor preferred him this unruly. Maybe it allowed him to feel safer. Seeing that her thoughts were running off topic, Chu Qingju blew out a breath. I don't know why San Mei would follow Rui Wang, this is getting messy, eh? She couldn't discuss the imperial son, so she could only shift the topic to Chang's Di Gong Fu. Whatever they do, it has nothing to do with you. There's no need to worry yourself over these people. He Hing understood what He Yuan was planning. To how cheap He Yuan was, he looked down on it. He was going to take a woman of Chang de Gong Fu and thought that was slapping him on the face, and for him to blame Qingju. He Hing thought to there and thought it was a bit funny. He wasn't a rash young boy, he wouldn't blame others for this occurrence. He Yuan was thinking of others like they were him, that really didn't fit him. When they returned to the Wang Fu, the night was already late. Early on, servants had hung lanterns in the Zhengyuan. Chu Qingju and He Heng washed before they slept. They were in a good mood thought, not being affected in the slightest by He Yuan. It was He Yuan that, upon returning to his fu, threw a moderate fit. He didn't even pay attention to Qin Bailu's request for a meeting. He only ordered the servants to send Chu Yu Su back to Changdagong Fu. When Qin Bailu heard that Wang Yi and Chu San Xiaojie were together at the Lantern Festival, she almost smashed something in anger. At last, she could only push down the anger. Changdagong Fu already had a Wang Fei come out of there, why would they think to send the other daughter to be a Siyi? Barely keeping a lid on her temper, Qin Bailu thought hatefully that no matter what, if this woman did enter the Fu, she wasn't going to go easy on her. On the second day after the Lantern Festival, a major event exploded at court. Before the imperial envoy sent to Jiangnan had reached their destination, they had been attacked by assassins. Cheng Wang had been wounded in the arm and gotten a high fever. The Minister of the Right, Wei Wenguang, was wounded even more serious, and was still in a coma. Instantly, the entire court roared. Who would have such daring to assassinate imperial envoys? Did they want to silence them? Chapter 42 Assassination of the Imperial Envoy was a major event. Even though Qing the Emperor had a soft personality, but when he encountered such an event, he felt that he was personally humiliated and furiously ordered for an investigation. He Heng stood next to He Qi. Hearing He Qi's righteous and fervent words, as though he was really trying to help Fu Wang, his eyebrow moved slightly as he silently lowered his head. Since it is already done, then this event will be investigated by Ning Wang and the Ministry of Justice. Qing the Emperor's temper hasn't calmed and his voice was somewhat coarse. These criminals, they are too outrageous. Chen accepts the order. He Qi knelt on one knee to receive the imperial decree, the lowered head disguising the satisfaction in his eyes. After court, He Qi didn't chat with others like he did usually but quickly left. He Heng looked at He Qi's rushing figure, a sliver of smile appearing on his face. Has His Highness Duan Wang ever heard of the story of the mantis and the cicada? The Minister of Defense, Luo Changqin, walked next to He Heng and bowed to him. He smiled as he looked at Ning Wang's back. The story is too common, but it does have some meaning. He Heng tilted his head slightly. He praised, Luo de Ren is wise. What wise? It's just speaking nonsense. Luo Changqing rubbed his beard, the cheer still on his face. How is His Highness Cheng Wang's injuries? As imperial subjects, all of us are very worried. Luo de Ren doesn't have to worry. Ben Wang's SID was only wounded in the arm. The messenger said the injury was already controlled. He Heng put his hands behind his back, leading Luo Changqing by half a pace. Fu Wang has already sent the head and the professor of the Imperial Hospital to quickly travel there. That is good. As subjects, we won't have to worry any longer. Hearing the answer he wanted, Luo Changqing chuckled as he raised his hands together. Your Highness Duan Wang, this subject still has other matters and has to leave first. Farewell. Luo de Ren, take care. He Heng smiled lightly and nodded at him. Walking as Luo Changqing walked away at a sedate pace, the smile slowly disappeared from He Heng's face. Luo Changqing, that wily fox, was worried about his grandson-in-law. He talked for this long period of time just to confirm He Ming's condition. Thinking about the ploys that Lao De and Lao San were playing behind their backs, He Heng curled his lips. No matter how loyal someone appeared, but at certain times, they had to look out for themselves, just like the present Luo family. If He Ming really had been mortally wounded, then that girl from the Luo family would become a widow. Most likely, the Luo family wouldn't let it go. Hearing what that old fox Luo Changqing had said, he had probably guessed who had been the person that really sent the order. As to why the other would tell him, he didn't care. He was certain of at least one thing now, which was the Luo family had negative feelings towards Lao De and Lao San. In Duan Wangfu, Chu Qingju looked at the flower lanterns hanging in the courtyard and let the servants take them down. The flower lanterns might be pretty, but each night, someone had to light them. They also needed people to stand watch in case of a fire. It was too troublesome. She might enjoy the luxuries of life but didn't want to trouble others for such a minor matter. More so, beautiful objects could only be looked at during special times to become even more beautiful. Wang Fei, Nubi heard that there was a fuss at Rui Wangfu this morning. Rui Wangfei was so angry she rode a carriage back to her maternal home. Jin Zhan walked behind Chu Qingju and gossiped in a low voice. Some people on the outside are spreading the news that Chang de Gongfu want to send San Xiaojie to Rui Wangfu. She couldn't understand. San Xiaojie had the skills and the looks and was a D daughter on top of that. Why would she want to be a CE-sher? The hand Chu Qingju reached with to hold a flower lantern paused and then, with waning enthusiasm, she took her hand back. She held the other's hand as she started to walk out of the courtyard. That year, Yang Shi used everything to try to get in through the main door of Chang de Gongfu. My good father didn't even wait for 100 days before welcoming her in. Everyone in this world has their own thoughts. The road they pick, we cannot interfere, but it's fine as long as they don't conflict with ours. Jin Zhan heard the absence of emotion in these words. She understood that Chang de Gongfu hadn't been good to Wang Fei. Shi, Yinlu, and Yuzan had been inserted into the Gongfu by Xiang Qing Ho Fu to serve near Wang Fei. And Mu Jin Jijia had been taken into the Fu when Furen had still been alive. After Wang Fei had been born, she had followed Wang Fei. Even though they had tried their best these years to protect Wang Fei still had to suffer indignities. Now that Wang Fei was cold to the people of the Gongfu, it was almost expected. But Nubi is worried that if they did this, it would affect Wang Fei's reputation. Jin Zhan thought back to the things that the Gongfu had done. Her face showed disgust as she frowned. It's so infuriating. What's infuriating? Chu Qingju smiled. This entire Jing city, who doesn't know that this Duan Wang Fei isn't on good terms with Chang de Gongfu, and is enemies with the stepmother. Even more, in the Jing city circles, almost everyone assumed that I was raised by aunt. How Chiyu Su conducts herself, it would only reflect on Liangshi, it wouldn't touch me. Jin Zhan instantly understood. After Wang Fei recovered, she distanced herself from Chang de Gongfu, and became closer to Xiang Qing Ho Fu. The incidents of the past had spread through Jing. She said with some joy, "Thank the heavens that these people can't affect Wang Fei." If Wang Yi blamed Wang Fei for these happenings, that would be a disaster. Chu Qingmu only laughed. There weren't that many lucky happenings and coincidences in this world. It was all made by people. Thinking about that family, her smile turned cold. And this world didn't have that many people that repaid grievances with a virtue. Coming out of the Jingyuan, it was a green stone path. On the two sides of the path were bamboo forests that were hidden behind the fake mountains, creating a clean and elegant scene. After passing through a moon door, it led straight into the main garden of the Wangfu. At the end of the right stone path, there was a small stream and a little bridge on top. When Chu Qingju had free time, she liked coming to the bridge to feed the fishes. That was more interesting than sitting in the halls and looking at the koi in the lotus pond. Randomly scattering the fish feed down, she watched as some goldfish carefully and quickly swallowed the food. She pointed at a nondescript black fish. This fish isn't as beautiful as the koi, but just swimming quietly next to the stones. If we don't pay attention, we can't even find it. Jin Zhan took a closer look and said uncertainly, that one also seems to be a koi, but it's just so inconspicuous. Raising an eyebrow, she scattered another handful of fish feed. She saw the black koi was like a bolt of lightning, swallowing a series of pellets before swimming away. It was the epitome of fast and precise. Chu Qingju poured the rest of the fish feed into the water with some disinterest. She asked in boredom, "Which ones are going to the Princess Royal's food tomorrow?" Nubi isn't clear, but heard that the Princess Royal had invited many. Jean Jean thought for a while. Nubi heard that many young ladies not of age had also received invitations from the Princess Royal. Chu Qingju nodded and knew what the Princess Royal was doing. Rather than be hurt over a man, why wouldn't she find people to amuse her? Women had to treat themselves. Did Chang de Gong Fu also receive one? Chu Qingju suddenly asked. If tomorrow both Chu Yusu and Qin Bailu came, she wondered with Qin Bailu's personality if something would happen. Jean Jean nodded. Chang de Gong Fu received an invitation. Chu Qingju rubbed her chin and observed, "Then I have to be careful tomorrow, and prevent myself from being pulled in." Just as she finished, she saw Huang Yang running quickly towards her and reporting that Jing Guifei had bestowed some gifts. What Jing Guifei had bestowed, the servants didn't have the qualifications to receive. Chu Qingju could only personally come to receive them. What surprised her was that Jing Guifei had let people send over a few palace flower and glass hair ornaments. These were finely crafted and from a glance it could be seen only those of high status could use them. Strangely, Chu Qingju felt that Jing Guifei was helping to prop her up. Tomorrow, there would be many womenfolk at the Princess Royal's foo. When there were many women gathered together, they naturally would like to compare clothing and jewelry. Jing Guifei was bestowing down objects from the palace. It at the very least sent a message that Jing Guifei, as her popo, was very satisfied with her, as the Urxi. She touched the palace flower. Chu Qingju's face revealed the smile. Maybe Jing Guifei wanted to tell the others that she, as her popo, wasn't unsatisfied at all because of what was happening with Chang de Gong Fu. What Jing Guifei had done was block the insults she might have gotten from the two Jolie tomorrow. And also told the women tomorrow that Jing Guifei was on her side. Even though the majority of the reason that Jing Guifei had made such a move was because of Duan Wang, Chu Qingju took this offering of goodwill. Because Jing Guifei had many ways to show her side but chose the one that was most advantageous for her. Tomorrow, I'll be using this palace flower and this glass hairpin. Chu Qingju picked two and put them in a small sandalwood box. She gave it to Yuzan, who usually made up her hair. Pieces from the palace, they should be more exquisite and rarer. The most important was that, to anyone with some skill and knowledge, they would know at a glance that these ornaments could only be used by those high up in the palace. Then there was no need to say where these objects came from. In Zhongjing Palace, Jing Guifei leaned on an armchair and said to Ding Mama, "The gifts went out. I hope Urxifu will understand." "Nyang Nyang, don't worry. Duan Wang Fei is an intelligent person, she definitely will understand your efforts." Ding Mama passed her a cup of tea and carefully served as she praised. "Nyang Nyang is kind, Duan Wang Fei will of course remember your good." "It's not important if she remembers." Jing Guifei held her cup and thought about her Urxifu. She couldn't help but frown. Could intelligent be a description for that person? Bearing a tray of pastries, Wei Ran Shuang quietly stood in her spot, a flicker of sadness and jealousy passing through her eyes. Didn't they say that the relationship between a popo and the Shifu was like the sky and the ground? Why was even Aunt worrying for Duan Wang Fei now? Thinking about Duan Wang Fei's conduct and manner of speech and what her aunt had once said to her, Wei Ran Shuang gritted her teeth, but the plate she had been holding accidentally fell to the ground. Jing Guifei saw Wei Ran Shuang standing at the doorway and set down the teacup in her hand. She said calmly, "Ran Shuang, you have stayed for a long time in the palace. Your mother is probably missing you. Ben Gong will let someone send you back tomorrow. Hi, the phrase used here was which is the question that led the answer which created the phrase. To repay grievances through virtue was thought by the scholars to be unusable, as if they replayed grievances with a virtue/boon, how would people repay a virtue? Therefore, the correct answer was to repay grievances justly and to repay a virtue with a virtue. Chapter 43. Wei Ran Shuang sat inside a blue cloth-covered carriage, holding a bag in a daze. The shaking as the carriage moved forward did nothing to clear her head. After the carriage moved forward for a period of time, it suddenly stopped. She sat in a daze for a beat before asking, "What's happening?" "Gunyang, Duan Wang Fu's carriage is coming over, we have to clear the road." The person outside answered. "Duan Wang Fu." Wei Ran Shuang's expression changed and she pushed aside the curtain covering the window. She saw up ahead that there were guards clearing the road, protecting an Ashtamangala carriage pulled by 4 horses. From a glance, it could be seen that it was a carriage specifically for Duan Wang Fu's womenfolk. Behind the large carriage, there were a few small yet finely made carriages. They most likely were used by the personal servant girls of Duan Wang Fei. Wei Ran Shuang bit her lower lip, her heart uncomfortable. Even Duan Wang Fei's personal attendants were riding in a carriage that was better than the one she had. She let the curtain down. As she listened to the people outside use astonished and admiring voices to talk about Duan Wang Fu's carriage, her stare gradually became resolute. After Duan Wang Fei's procession had passed, the green cloth-covered carriage that Wei Ran Shuang sat in started to sway as it made its way forward again. When she came out of the carriage, Wei Ran Shuang looked at the relatively bare door of her family's fu. There weren't any sedans. She held her Yahuan's hand as she walked in. Her family home was just this big, there were no high-ranking officials and basically no space to stand on protocol. Wei Qinshi saw her daughter return and a crowd of people carrying gifts. She smiled and remarked, "You seem heavier." Guifei Nyang is very good at raising people. Wei Ran Shuang forced a smile and let her mother put away the objects that Jing Guifei had bestowed down. Then she said, "Aunt said you probably were missing me, so she let me return." Hearing this, Wei Qinshi's face slightly changed. After she motioned for the others in the room to leave, she said with some worry, "Did Guifei Nyang not like you?" Wei Ran Shuang shook her head, her voice carrying full of distress. "Guifei Nyang said Duan Wang Fei was very good." "What does that mean? Does she spurn you to become her son Shi? Wei Qinshi's voice was full of indignation as she ranted, "She's our Wei family's daughter. Now that she's become Guifei Nyang, has she forgotten her maternal family?" No matter what, her father-in-law and Jing Guifei's father had been full brothers. Now that their branch was declining, Jing Guifei hadn't done anything to help and even looked down on her daughter. It was somewhat upsetting. But remembering that her own husband was only a minor 5th-grade provincial governor before transferring back to Jing and that both husband and her children needed to rely on Jing Guifei in the future, she could only suppress her dissatisfaction and sighed. "Nyang has bestowed down so many things, it can be seen she is still looking after you. As to Duan Wang, I'll try to think of a way for you." Wei Ran Shuang's face reddened and she whispered, "His Highness Duan Wang is a good person." Wei Qinshi looked at her daughter's bashful expression and decided to meet that Duan Wang Fei before making a decision. Her maternal father and brothers might not have great abilities, but they were a branch of the Qin clan, and could find someone who could speak out. If her daughter went into Duan Wang Fu, it was a good road. At least there still was Jing Guifei Nyang, so Duan Wang Fei wouldn't harshly treat her daughter. Duan Wang and her daughter also were cousins and would care a bit more based on the relationship. Going into the Wang Fu, it was better than marrying a minor official who was never going to come into the light. The Princess Royal's Fu at this time was full of noise, clothing and music flying everywhere. When Chu Qingju walked into the Huyan, she found that if it wasn't that these people were wearing medieval clothing, she thought she was at one of the modern parties. When she came in, instantly a formally dressed mama carefully ushered her into a pavilion. She saw Wei Qingyi sitting down next to a grandly dressed woman. That person was most likely Jean and Princess. She cheerfully came and performed an elegant bow, so this must be Jijie. Nice to meet you, Jijie. Jean and Princess stood and held her hand, returning the same greeting. Daimai, don't be so still. I called everyone here just for relaxing and having fun, not to be so courteous. Finishing, she pulled her to sit down beside herself, and let the servant serve tea. Chu Qingju smiled and replied, "That's great, I'm so tired of the rules every day." Finishing, she looked at the surroundings. "Where's nephew and niece? I got the two of them to go play with the little guests from the other families." Jean and Princess waved her hand. "Big people and little people can't play together. They don't come and disturb us, isn't this nice?" Chu Qingju smiled but didn't respond. Even though young children were noise, but as an aunt, she could only hear this but not agree. "Which child isn't loud?" Wei Qingyi responded. She herself had a son. When she talked about children, she always had enthusiasm. It's good for children to run around and be loud, their bodies become stronger. Jean and Princess nodded. That's so true, it's so hard for a woman to raise a child. Finishing, she smiled at Chu Qingju. Daimai doesn't have children now, you still have some relaxing days. Chu Qingju smiled as she took a drink of tea. It's nice too to have children around. She detected the friendliness barely noticeable in Jean and Princess. If it was any other person, at this time they would asked when she was having a child, but Jean and Princess made it seem like a joke. Looking at the noise in other families, I find it much harder to care for a child than looking. Jean and Princess had no desire to keep discussing children and turned to say, when Ji and Daimai married, I wasn't in Jing, and didn't have the luck to meet you. Today, I have to say that my Didi is very lucky to marry such a good person. It's an event of great fortune. Trying hard to let herself reveal a bashful expression, Chu Qingju lowered her head. Jean and Princess saw Chu Qingju's red cheeks and knew she was embarrassed. She smiled and teased, I forgot you're newly married, you're embarrassed now. When she first saw the other, she had felt she was eye-catching, but this bashful young girl in front of her made her agree with the Empress's words. This Duan Wang Fei was very suited to her Di. Wei Qingyi saw that Jean and Princess Royal had the desire to be close with Chu Qingju and looked at Chu Qingju in surprise. Today, her daimai was still dressed vibrantly. That already beautiful face, if it was a 9 before, today it was a 10. She knew very clearly how men liked this type of beautiful woman, but she was even clearer of the fact that, just based on a face, a woman couldn't keep a man. Princess Rui Wang Fei has arrived. Jean and Princess heard the servant's report and the smile on her face dimmed. But if one didn't look closely, they wouldn't have seen it. Quickly welcomed them in. She had never interacted closely with Rui Wang, but the arrogant conduct of Rui Wang had passed into her ears a long time ago. As a married princess, she never commented on these kinds of matters, but she didn't like Rui Wang and his family. A man with this personality, if he succeeded, then all of his siblings won't have easy lives. Qin Bailu's mood wasn't very bright, but the usual smile on her face didn't dim. She walked into the pavilion and after exchanging bows with Jean and Princess, she sat down next to Chu Qingju. Sitting closely together, Chu Qingju found her face seemed slightly swollen. Qin Bailu had applied heavier makeup today and seemed more mature. Wei Qingyi held a teacup and blew on the tea leaves on the surface. She slowly took a drink before smiling at Qin Bailu, remarking, San Daimai is a bit late today. When I came out today, I met some matters. Sorry, did Jia and the two saw for waiting. Qin Bailu forced out some mirth, the hand holding the teacup tightening. It was Daimiai's fault. Your Dasawa is joking with you, you aren't late. Jean and Princess saw that something wasn't right from her appearance and her voice softened, since you have all arrived and come with me to chat with the others. After so many years, I'm not familiar anymore with Jing's womenfolk. Since the sister-in-law asked, the three daimai naturally stood and accompanied Jean in to converse with the women. The three sat at the front with Jean and Princess and found that many young girls were sitting in the garden. They didn't know why Jean and Princess had done such a thing and smiled without speaking. Chu Qingju found Liang Shi was in the gardens as well with Chu Yusu and Chu Huishui. She tilted her head to look at Qin Bailu. As expected, her face had become darker. Watching the scene, she couldn't help but sigh. Liang Shi was in too much of a rush and too short-sighted. She knew that Rui Wangfei was coming today. Why did she come? Did she think that Jean and Princess would favor Chu Yusu? Today, so many lovable guests have come. Ben Gong likes having a good time. Why don't these lovable guests look at some paintings and compose a few poems to widen our scope? Jean and Princess' tone was a consulting one, but when her words landed, people appeared with drawings and brush and ink. To show off in front of the princess and the Wang Fei, many were very willing. So these young girls started to examine the drawings and compose a good poem. Chu Qingju saw the excited young girls and, in a flash, felt that Jean and Princess was amusing herself. These young girls didn't have many important connections to her and having some fun was a good thing. These people were appreciating drawings. Chu Qingju and the others naturally wouldn't partake in the activity and so they chatted as they drank tea. I heard that the lanterns a few nights ago at the Lantern Festival were very beautiful. It was a pity I didn't have the time, otherwise I would have gone to see. Ning Wang Fei Wei Qingyi's voice held regret. The lanterns in the Fu might be beautiful but they don't have the same flavor. Chu Qingju saw that Qin Bailu's face became even uglier. Daimiai, did you go? Wei Qingyi pushed the topic onto Chu Qingju's head. By now who didn't know that Duan Wang had taken Duan Wang Fei out to see the flower lanterns and onto Rui Wang's boat to see the fireworks? Chu Qingju raised an eyebrow. Wei Qingyi was asking this just to instigate a conflict between her and Qin Bailu. That was because Chu Yusu was like her, they were all named Chu. At the same time in Duan Wangfu, He Hing heard expected news. Lao San is taking the Duke of Changde's third daughter as Ce Fei. He Hing repeated with a calm face as he looked at Wang Chongming, you are sure? Rui Wangfu has already sent the letter and the gifts to Changde Gongfu, it's very likely. Wang Chongming said, but it's unknown if Changde Gongfu will accept. Wang Chongmin didn't dare to mention Wang Fei so he only said, Dai Duo has also passed along information. Rui Wangyi is very angry at the attempted assassination of the imperial envoy. He is suspicious it was Ning Wang that purposefully framed him. He Hing lowered his head, putting down the carved root. He tapped the bottom of the root, let him have his tantrum. It could be seen at the bottom of the carved root, there was a hollow building. It looked beautiful, but in reality, it wasn't strong. Chapter 44 Pointing at the mulberry tree and swearing at the locust tree. Females tended to prefer subtle and graceful poems. Chu Qingju took the poems that Wei Qingyi passed over. She casually took a look and saw characters for light wind, wispy smoke and others along those lines. She carelessly flipped through before handing them to Qin Bailu on her other side. I feel all of these gunyang have literary skill, but I am not skilled poetically. San Daimiai, have a look instead. Qin Bailu took these poems that had been picked out by Jean and Princess. The one on top was the work of the third gunyang of Changde Gongfu. A hint of ice appeared at the corner of her lips. She flipped through and said to Chu Qingju, Saw comes from a noble family. Even your Fu San Gunyang is this talented, why should you underestimate yourself? These words were somewhat harsh. Even though Rui Wang had the emperor's favor, he was still an younger brother. You, as a Di Mei, talking in this type of tone to your Saw, it was not having any respect. How was it that the family Qing was an educated and literary family yet produce a woman of such conduct? Jean and Princess' eyes jumped. She glanced at Qin Bai Lu before lowered her head to drink tea. My Fu. Chu Qing Ju giggled as she took out a handkerchief to wipe her mouth. Her voice was gentle as she lectured, San Di Mei, it's not that Saw likes lecturing others, but your words are too improper. Us women, when we marry, we follow our husbands. My Fu is Wang Ye's Fu. San Daimei, are you saying that I am not a member of the imperial family? This kind of words, even the empress couldn't say them, to say nothing of Qin Bai Lu as a daimei. Qin Bai Lu finished listening to the speech and in her heart, she hated Chu Qing Ju for not leaving her a shred of dignity. On the outside, she could only smile and apologize, Saw, forgive me. It's just my mouth got away from me. Saw, please forgive me. Finishing, she stood to give a bow. Chu Qing Ju didn't stand to return the bow but nodded instead, Mimi doesn't have to be so courteous. There isn't that many protocols between us Jolie, but today, I had to say a word. Now, I am Duan Wang Fei, my mother is Chu Tianshi. Daimei, you can't get mixed up in the future. The smile on Qin Bai Lu's face almost froze. She hadn't expected Chu Qing Ju to straightforwardly throw the Duke of Changde aside. Thinking about the rumors involving Changde Gongfu and Duan Wang Fei. That the Duke of Changde was a dissolute person, not yet 100 days after his wife had died, he married a wife. That Chu Liangshi was not a loving mother and harshly treated the daughter of the previous wife, and didn't even care for the Shu daughters, only being caring to her own daughter and her maternal family. No wonder that everywhere in these past days were the previous scandals of Changde Gongfu. It was waiting here. Chu Qing Ju wanted to clearly express her attitude towards Changde Gongfu. Many people had come today and in front of all these people, Qin Bai Lu couldn't throw a tantrum despite the great humiliation she endured. She could only sit with her suppressed rage. She handed the poems in her hand back to Jean and Princess. Which one does Princess think is the best? Chu Qing Ju looked at her anger simmering under the surface and thought uncharitably that Rui Wang and his wife were naturally a couple. Their way of speech was not well thought out and insulting. Their arrogant conduct was just asking for retaliation. Ben Gong feels that the young ladies Chu and Lu are both good. Jean and Princess raised her head. Who are these two Gunyang? Come up to let Ben Gong see. Chu Qing Ju looked at the Gunyang that came up to bow. Chu Yu Su was warm and beautiful to the eye. The Lu family's Gunyang was thin and graceful. She was truly someone that would catch someone's eye. If she didn't guess wrong, this family Lu's Gunyang should be the great scholar Lu Jing Hong's daughter, Yu Rong. Ben Gong sees you two's poems both have their own merits. They say there is never just one winner in the arts. Why don't you both be the winners? Jean and Princess had heard of the event between Chu Yu Su and Rui Wang. She gave Chu Yu Su an extra look. This woman did have the looks of a spring flower, her brows like a painting. At this time, she couldn't help but look at Duan Wang Fei as she smiled faintly and tasted the tea. The two were sisters of the same father, but their appearances and aura were completely different. Chu Yu Su was very beautiful, but it wasn't a rare kind of beauty. But while Duan Wang Fei's appearance wasn't peerless, it just made people feel she was unspeakably beautiful, each move and word carrying the flavor of beauty. This probably was each person's charisma. Jean and Princess let the servants present a set of precious ink and hair ornament to Chu and Lu before giving a few more compliments and letting the two sit down. She didn't even mention once the relation between Chu Yu-su and Chu Qing-ju. Very quickly there were servants that presented fresh cakes and fruits. Everyone saw that these were all good things, and it could be seen how much the emperor favored Jean and Princess. No wonder the Wang Feis were all this harmoniously interacting with Jean and Princess. Even a person as proud as Rui Wang Fu was courteous. From beginning to end, Wei Qingyi, who hadn't spoken more than a few words, felt that Chu Qingju's fate seemed to naturally conflict with Qin Bailu. And each time, it was Chu Qingju who won. Chu Qingju dared to humiliate Qin Baisu. She must be relying on the favor that Duan Wang held for her. Otherwise, why would she speak without regard for the consequences? She thought in derision, when Duan Wang didn't favor her, how would she live? If she had offended the Jolie underneath her, who would pity her in the future? If it was her, she would have said it more beautifully. At least, she wouldn't have made it so the person had no dignity left. She sighed and raised a teacup to disguise her emotions. Sometimes, only the cruel reality could make women learn and grow. We are pretty done with the drawings. If everyone doesn't dislike it, why don't you come with Ben Gong to hear some music? Jean and Princess held a Yahuan's hand as she stood. Once she spoke, everyone all agreed and said they had no dislike. The stage had already been set up. After everyone sat down, the actors started singing. The meaning, broadly said, was a heartless man and a girl in love. In the end, the woman grew old and left before the man regretted his actions and repented. Chu Qingju saw this kind of plot and felt uncomfortable. Why was it that the woman had to stay at home to care for the elders, raise the children while the man could drink and be merry outside? When the woman was old and her youth was gone, the man would have been bored of playing outside and wanted to return home. Why was it that the man was considered to be so valuable and admirable when he repented? Who saw the youth of the woman, the blood and tears of the woman? When she was old, and couldn't enjoy the beautiful times of youth anymore, what was the use in the man repenting? According to her, these plays had been written by vulgar scholars to satisfy their own desires. They always wanted their own wives to be virtuous and taciturn, and hoped that other people's wives were extremely lusty. In reality, they would never be able to find a wife. The only thing they could do was eat one meal before looking for the next, squatting in old and drafty cottages fantasizing that a landlord's daughter or a noble daughter will wanted to marry them. Mu Jin saw her mistress' face wasn't well and changed a cup of hot tea for her. She asked in a small voice, "Mistress, is your body not well?" Chu Qingju held the teacup as she faintly replied, "It's fine. I just don't want to see this kind of man have such a virtuous and generous woman." She had been talking in a small voice, but Jean and Princess had heard. Jean and Princess nodded and laughed icily. That's so true, this type of man still managed to live out his days with his family, it's so disgusting. Get the singers to leave, Ben Gong doesn't like this play. The actors quickly retreated, not understanding how they had provoked Her Highness the Princess into such anger. A few days earlier, I heard a repeat of The Record of Pan Zhi 1, it's somewhat interesting. Does Jijia want to hear? Chu Qingju gave a faint smile and commented, the men and women in this world, they have to respect that karma will happen by the end. How can someone take advantage all the time? Jean and Princess felt that Duan Wang Fei was becoming more and more pleasing to look at. She picked The Record of Pan Zhi before she said to Chu Qingju, Daimai, your words are good. I think the same. This Jean and Princess really did have some temper. Chu Qingju smiled as she raised the teacup, Your Highness is wise. Qin Bailu stared coldly as Chu Qingju and Jean and Princess talked. She turned her head to glare icily at Chu Yu-su who sat in the corner. The women of the family Chu were all fox spirits disguised in those long sleeves which danced beautifully. The Jijia was a temptress, the Mimi did what fox spirits always did. None of them were good. The Record of Pangaea was the story of a grassroots Zuikai who fell in love with a noble Xiaojia and tried different ways to win the good feelings of the Xiaojia. But this Zuikai had a childhood sweetheart who was his fiancée. The Zuikai wanted it all, so he concealed the information. In the end, what he had done had been found out by both the Xiaojia and the childhood sweetheart. He was rejected by both people and was in poverty for his entire life. The one he wanted to climb up to was the noble Xiaojia, the one he wanted to break off was the childhood sweetheart. In the end, he didn't climb up or break anything off. This was the biggest insult to the poor scholar's greediness. When this play came out, no one had originally recommended it. Which man would like to watch such a play? And the women who were enclosed in their inner chambers naturally didn't know there was this kind of a play. So when this play was acted out, many were deeply attracted. After the play finished, the crowd started discussing, this saying how shameless the scholar was, that saying that what the Xiaojia and the sweetheart done was right. It's true that the scholar is deserving of hatred, but this noble Xiaojia should have secretly met with the scholar before. She nearly ruined her reputation, Qin Bailu pointed out with a mirthless smile. This world still lives by the decisions of the mother and father. Such a good girl, it's not a good thing to mix with adult men. These words had an indirect target. Many people present had heard what occurred at the Lantern Festival, and so no one continued the topic. That was a matter of Rui Wangfu. Rui Wang's personality had always been proud, it was better not to provoke him. Liang Shi heard Qin Bailu's speech and her face changed. However, Chu Yusu, standing by her side, didn't change her expression as she kept a smile on her face. It was as though the target that Qin Baishang's, pointing at the mulberry tree and swearing at the locust tree, wasn't her. Wei Qingyi and Chu Qingju both smiled and didn't speak. They seemed to have not heard Qin Bailu's words. The two exchanged a glance, raised the teacup in their hand, and simultaneously took a drink. Luckily this noble Xiaojia didn't make a great mistake. To know she had stepped wrong and return rather than continue onwards, it is a good thing. Jean and Princess's words broke the tense silence. A sharp smile appeared on her face. This kind of man, you can't tolerate or spoil him. Otherwise, he'll forget who he really is. Once the words came out, everyone's inside was full of different flavors. In this world, what man didn't steal some, what man didn't like beauty? Chu Qingju looked at Jean and Princess. On her face, she saw what looked like a certain type of resolution. One is to claim connections of higher status is break, twist, snap, suffer loss. Chapter 45. High up above. After watching 2 plays, it was already past 1 and Jean and Princess invited everyone to a meal. She let the Gunyang who hadn't come of age to gather and freely chat. She and the noble ladies and officials' wives that married chatted about the interesting things in Jing. Chu Qingju heard these people once again mention the spiritual master Xian Ling on the 5 Estates Monastery. It looked like this spiritual master Xian Ling had some skill. Regardless of whether there were ghosts and gods in this world, but the fact that a person could be recommended by so many women used to living in a complicated environment, it showed his abilities were exceptional. As to in which direction they laid, that depended on the person. When Jean and Princess heard this, she was unexpectedly calm. She smiled calmly. If he is an extraordinary person, there definitely will be a change to meet him in the future. She did say that, but Chu Qingju could see that she didn't even care about such a thing. Chu Qingju held Mu Jin's hand as she stood to change clothes. On her way back, she met Chu Yusu accompanied by her Yahuan. She stopped in her steps and calmly watched as Chu Yusu gave her a full and respectful greeting. Greetings to Duan Wangfei. Yusu was now very clear. The Dejia in front of her didn't want to interact with Chang de Gongfu at all. She could even see on Dejia's body the coldness she held towards Chang de Gongfu. She had heard many of the rumors on the outside. She wanted to argue but found all the rumors were true. And some events that occurred were even worse than the rumors. She didn't have the courage to use the appellation of Dejia. The reputation of the Fu was worse and worse. It had affected her and Jia's marriage prospects. She wasn't content with becoming the furin of a normal official. But none of the D sons of the noble families wanted to marry her. So she wanted to try her best using her talents and beauty. It was better than mediocrely finishing her life. San Xiaojie, please rise. Mu Jin saw her Wang Fei stand still and came up a step to give insubstantial support. She once again moved behind Chu Qingju. Chu Qingju looked at the color of the sky. Why are you alone here? I just saw the Gunyang of the Tao and Lu families chatting together. Why don't you go play with them? Chu Yusu's face was somewhat ugly. She forced a smile and answered, just wanted to take a walk. Nodding, Chu Qingju didn't speak more. I'll go first, you be careful. Farewell Wang Fei. Chu Yusu bowed again. She looked at Chu Qingju surrounded by quite a few Yahuan as they ushered her towards Jean and Princess. She bit the corner of her lip to push down the soreness in her heart. By now, those noble girls weren't willing to interact with her. They thought they were so high up, not willing to interact with her as someone willing to become a chia. Really, they were normal people as well. In the future, they also had to pour their heart to try to hold their husband's heart and still manage the favored Ce Sure. By that time, they would all be that common eye of the fish. This kind of thoughts might just be Chu Yusu comforting herself, but by now she could only think like so to keep that strange sense of jealousy she had towards Chu Qingju. She shouldn't fantasize that if the person decreed would have been her, the person respected and flattered would be her. Wei Qingyi and the others saw Chu Qingju return and teased, "You finally came back, we just mentioned you." "Mention me?" Chu Qingju sat back on her original seat, picking up an already skinned tangerine to put into her mouth. "Said you have good fortune. All the Ce Sure in the Fu are so obedient and doesn't have too many tricks." Wei Qingyi smiled, "Not like our Fu, there's many beauties." Chu Qingju gave a cough and swallowed down the tangerine. She wiped the corner of her mouth. "De Sao is joking. Just recently, a Ce Fei on Duan Wang Fu had been demoted to Chia, and then a certain Tong Fong had died due to illness. Before that, there was a Tong Fong married off to the estate. This was being called obedience. Was this Wei Qingyi purposefully shaming her? "I'm not as virtuous as De Sao and can't run a household so well." "De Sao, don't laugh at me." Chu Qingju knew the only people present who dared to discuss Duan Wang Fu was the three of Jean and Princess, Wei, and Qin. She smiled at Jean and Princess and informed, "Jijie, you may not know, De Sao is virtuous and able, but she always compliments those that are not, like me. Jijie, you have to help get justice for me." All right. Ben Gong's brothers could marry you all to be Wang Fei. It's their good luck." Jean and Princess smiled as she placed a place of red date cake into the middle. "All of you eat a bit more cake, and don't mutually compliment each other anymore." Wei Qingyi smiled and let the topic go. She knew that Duan Wang Fu was controlled now by Chu Qingju. The Hoyuan was like a steel box. A few days ago, Wang Yi had a dark expression on his face because of a certain Tong Fong's death. That Tong Fong must have been Wang Ye's person. The people accompanying them were foreign that were of some status. It was a pity that Chu Qingju's aunt, Tian Luosher, wasn't here. Otherwise, Chu Qingju wouldn't feel so bored. Jean and Princess holding a picture-admiring banquet today. It was to let these foreign knew that she, Jean and Princess, was going to put roots down in Jing. At the same time, it was letting them go home to tell their husbands she was going to sort out her Fuma the Count of Beilu. These people should widen their eyes and don't involve themselves. This tactic had the flavor of pressuring people through privilege. But who was it that let her be the princess royal as personally decreed by the emperor? It wasn't as though there weren't other princesses in the Delong dynasty, but she was the only princess royal. This was enough to prove her position. Chu Qingju felt that Jean Princess was a smart and realistic woman. She had a privileged identity, she didn't have to embarrass herself for that supposed feelings. She had given birth to son and daughter for the Count of Beilu. Rationally, the Count of Beilu shouldn't be able to have a Chia, but the Count of Beilu did such a thing. This didn't just humiliate Jean Princess, it was humiliating the imperial family. If today, Jean Princess allowed such a thing to occur, then in the future, other Princess Fuma will follow in doing so. One leads to the next. At the end, the most tragic would be the women. After the banquet finished, Chu Qingju came out of the Princess Fu and saw Liang Shi and Chu Yusu at the main gate. Towering above them was Qin Bailu. She didn't stop her steps, passing through the three of them to enter her carriage. Others were willing to act out a drama, she didn't want any drama. The carriage started moving. Chu Qingju looked through the window and managed to see Qin Bailu show a disdainful smile at Liang Shi and Chu Yusu. Liang Shi's face was full of rage that didn't dare erupt. She curled her lips and let go of the curtain. Returning to Duan Wangfu, Chu Qingju saw Xu Kuei and Rui Xiang standing guard outside the gate to the Zhengyuan. She knew that it was possible that He Heng was inside, so she asked, "Is Wang Yi inside the room?" Xu Kuei bent and answered, "Wang Fei, Wang Yi had come for a while." Nodding to show she knew, Chu Qingju passed through the main gate and crossed the garden of the Zhengyuan. When she came to the outer room of the suite, she saw He Heng was looking at the beauty dancing under the moon that she had the servants hang up on the wall. "Wang Yi," Chu Qingju smiled and walked next to He Heng. She stood abreast with him. "What's wrong with the painting?" "I remember, you also have such a long dress." He Heng kept on feeling that there was a shadow of Chu Qingju in this painting. "How come Wang Yi didn't think that this painting is me?" Chu Qingju laughed. He Heng looked at the signature of the scroll. It was actually Chu Qingju's work. The time of the painting was just a few days ago. No wonder he hadn't seen it yesterday. It must have been that someone hung it up today. Qingju knows how to dance. He Heng was shocked. There were many noble girls that studied the Qin, Qi, literature and art, but there was not even a few that learned how to dance. "Learned myself," Chu Qingju raised an eyebrow, as though she was proud yet helpless. "In the past, there wasn't anything to do. In the room by myself, I wanted to spend away the time, so I studied from the books." He Heng knew that Chu Liangshi hadn't been good to Chu Qingju and had expected that she wouldn't have spent any thought on letting Chu Qingju learn the things that proper women should know. He saw her smile was both proud and helpless. He smiled and asked, "When will I have the luck to see?" Chu Qingju raised her smooth and beautiful chin like a proud empress. "When Wang Yi does something that makes Chia happy, Chia will consider this matter." Clearly calling herself Chia, but He Heng heard a hint of pride. But he still felt that the other's state was so ticklish to his heart. He couldn't resist reaching with a hand to touch Chu Qingju's waist. Qingju's waist is thin and flexible, it should make for an extremely beautiful dance. The corners of Chu Qingju's mouth drew back. "Wang Yi, are you mocking me for being a dancer girl?" He Heng seemed to understand why women always made trouble without a reason, but strangely felt the need to explain himself. He helplessly drew the person into his embrace. "Those women aren't worthy of being mentioned together with Qingju. You only dance for me, no one else will see. This is between us as husband and wife. I like it, I'm not teasing you." Finishing, he added another sentence, "In the future, when I make you happy, you have to lower yourself to dance once for me." Chu Qingju gave a gentle snort. Since you are so expectant, when the spring comes, I will dance one for you to watch. This body was truly flexible. When it danced, it wouldn't seem hard and without grace. But she wasn't really wanting to dance for Hihing like this. Men were a strange type of creature. They liked playing with willing women, but they looked down at a woman for being too willing. From a certain viewpoint, men were even more conflicted than women at times. But if she made such a matter a delight between the two of them, to let the other feel expectant, but not let the other easily see, then it will let Hiheng's heart give birth to a feeling of intimacy akin to a secret belonged to the two of them. Sometimes, a beautiful secret was useful in closing the distance between man and woman. Hiheng saw Chu Qingju's pouty state and felt the cat in his heart was tickling him even more. He breathed in the smell of her hair and said in a hoarse voice, "All right." There was clearly layers of clothing separating them, but he seemed to be able to feel the fineness under the clothing. He couldn't resist carrying the person to bed. Chu Qingju didn't want to play the game of being on top of the other before eating. She leaned her head to Hiheng's chest as she said, "I saw that Jean and Princess Royal seems to want to separate from Count of Beilu." A second of silence, she then heard Hiheng's voice full of disdain with a hint of anger. Separation is necessary. How could he slight an imperial princess? This matter, it won't end so easily. Chu Qingju gave a smile of unclear meaning. Look, this was the people of the imperial house. No matter how arrogant, warm, or honest they were usually, in their bones, the high attitude naturally existed. Chapter 46 Kuei Yuan Palace. The Count of Beilu managed to travel to Jing City on the 26th day of the first month. The first place he went to was the Princess Royal's Fu, but before he could enter, he was thrown out by the servants of the Fu. He hadn't known that the servants would make things this difficult for him. When he was about to start in on them, Jean and Princess came out, supported by Yahuan. Because the Count of Beilu had constantly been thinking of that mistress, the husband and wife hadn't been together for many days in the recent months. The Count of Beilu stood under the main gate, looking at the grandly dressed princess. The fiery anger instantly was extinguished by cold water. He muttered, "Princess. What is Fuma doing?" Jean and Princess looked mockingly behind him. "Why don't I see your little lover?" The Count of Beilu's face was conflicted. The servants and guards of the Princess Fu had filled the gate. He didn't want to humiliate himself in front of these people, but he had to do so. Otherwise, his entire Chao family would be impacted, to say nothing of protecting the mistress he liked. The princess misunderstood. "It was just a little bit of fun, it wouldn't have influenced the feelings between us." Count of Beilu forced himself to smile as he gave a deep bow. "I ask for Princess to forgive Weifu. Weifu will not do such an idiotic thing in the future." Jean and Princess disdainfully looked at the man in front of his eyes. He still was elegant and graceful, full of warmth and education. The person was still the same person, but the heart had changed. A man with a changed heart. If she kept it, it was just guarding a stinky skin, she would just disgust herself. For some reason, she wanted to laugh and she did. "Fuma, this joke is really funny." Ben Gong, in the past, hadn't known that Fuma would have lost himself because of playing with an amusement. Idiotic or not, you know in your heart. These kinds of words, Ben Gong doesn't care to hear. Since it was Fu Wang's imperial decree that summoned you into Jing, you can go into the palace to explain to Fu Wang. The Count of Beilu's heart suddenly panicked. He heard the disdain in the princess' words. But if this event didn't have the princess to mediate, the emperor will definitely heavily punish him. And the family Chao would be over. Originally, his family Chao had been one with only a title yet no power. Now that the incident has gotten larger, they might not even be able to keep their title. Thinking about this, the Count of Beilu could only continue. "Princess, we have been together for so many years, we can't let such a minor thing affect our feelings for each other." This event, it was Weifu's great mistake. As long as Princess is willing to forgive Weifu, Weifu is willing to do anything. "Since you know we have been married for so long, why did you do such a shameless thing to break our union?" Jean and Princess wasn't moved and looked expressionlessly at the Count of Beilu. In this world, there is a reason for anything. These years, Ben Gong has never slighted any of your Chow family. "You have treated me so, how can you come here?" Finishing, she turned and ordered the gate's men, "Close the main gate." The Count of Beilu watched as the main gate slowly closed. He wanted to beg, but seeing Jean and Princess gaze, he couldn't say one word. Because the other's eyes told him, no matter what he said, the other wouldn't change their heart. The news that the Count of Beilu had begged to see the princess but was rejected quickly spread through Jing. Many said that the Count of Beilu was too reckless, and there were those that said the Count of Beilu wasn't smart enough, but no one dared to say that Jean and Princess Royal was too aggressive. It wasn't easy marrying a daughter of the imperial family. When Chu Qingju heard of the incident, she let people find out more to tell her. In the deep courtyard, there really wasn't anything. If she didn't listen to what was happening outside to amuse herself, she didn't know how to spend her time. No wonder the women here put on big or small banquets, looked at flowers, tea, paintings when they had time. All these were just excuses for the noblewomen to gather and waste time. The night that this news had spread, the Fu received the Empress' decree. It said they were having a family banquet at Kuei Yuan Palace tomorrow and that He Heng and Chu Qingju both had to be there. After receiving the decree, Chu Qingju felt a bit surprised. The Empress didn't seem to be one that meddled. To hold a family banquet so unexpectedly, it was most likely for Jean and Princess Matter. He Heng saw Chu Qingju in deep thought, so he spoke, "You don't have to think too much. Tomorrow, other than us brothers, I'm afraid there will only be Zhang Jie Jinan, Fu Huang and Muhu." This was saying that the other consorts didn't have the qualifications to be there. Chu Qingju understood. This was the warm-up to sorting out the Count of Beilu. She nodded, "Yes, it should be us maternal family who sort out this heartless man. To put aside such a good wife and entangle himself with an unclear woman, we can't let him off easily." Detecting Chu Qingju's anger, He Heng smiled and stated, "It seems you had a good time with Zhang Jie." Chu Qingju sat down on the carved chair. She sighed and observed, "Zhang Jie is a good woman. The Count of Beilu is truly despicable. He clearly had a very good person at home, but he had to go out to touch the unclean and unknown ones. It can be seen that the feelings from these many years, to him, it wasn't important." Seeing her expression seem tired, he didn't know how he just started speaking. "There are millions of men in the world. Some don't care for old affections, other people deepen their affections over time. Zhang Jie just met a bad man." Chu Qingju suddenly smiled. Her left hand propped up her chin. She tilted her head to He Heng and said, "Wang Yi has to be the person whose affections deepen over time." He Heng's gaze was dark. He answered hoarsely, "Naturally I'm the kind of person whose affections deepen over time." But in this sentence, he put emphasis on a certain word. A man and woman alone. He Heng's purposeful flirtation aroused Chu Qingju's interest. They didn't know who moved first, but when Chu Qingju managed to react, she was already lying on the bed, revealing half a shoulder. He Heng's dog teeth were licking and biting at her shoulder. Feeling her shoulder tickle, Chu Qingju shrugged her shoulders and laughed out loud. This provoked He Heng to bite tighter. He said hoarsely, "It seems I didn't put in enough effort, that Qingju can still laugh." Finishing, he purposefully pinched at her waist, causing Chu Qingju to laugh even louder. He clearly knew that she was most ticklish at her waist, yet he still purposefully put his hand there. Chu Qingju flashed to deliberately hide in his embrace, and before he noticed, she took grasp of Little Heng. She threatened, "Wang Yi, don't tickle me, it wouldn't be good if I accidentally move my hand." He Heng gave a deep laugh. He replied, "Wang Fei, are you threatening me?" Finishing, his body pushed down, pinning the person under his body. He gently kissed her ear before raising his head to look at her and saying, "Then you have to take good care of it." "What is taking good care of it?" Chu Qingju widened her eyes, looking innocently at He Heng. Her hand very carelessly trembled a few times and felt Little Heng stand to attention. This was igniting He Heng's very large fire, and he instantly threw himself in. An hour later, the servants started to move the bathtub and hot water to Jingyuan. These Taijian all carefully kept their head down, afraid to even look twice at the clothing and ornaments on the ground. But just from the clothing on the ground, they knew just how fiery it had been between Wang Yi and Wang Fei. Chu Qingju sprawled at the border of the tub, permitting He Heng to knead her shoulders. Her voice carried laziness as she asked, "I heard we have a property in the Jing suburbs. It has hot springs. You like them?" He Heng's hand touched the fine skin and smiled as his chest glued itself onto that smooth and thin back. "Yuquan Yuan, 3, does have a large hot spring. In a few days, I'll take you to play for a few days." "That would be good." Chu Qingju tilted her head to gently kiss He Heng's face. "Wang Yi, don't forget." A beautiful woman giving a kiss was naturally a good thing. He Heng stole a few more from Chu Qingju's lips before confirming, "Things that I have promised you, I won't forget." Chu Qingju smiled as she straightened her head. The inky strands of hair flowed in the water, hiding the bottom of the tub. When she came to Kuei Yuan Palace, Chu Qingju found that there were a few more hints of life this time. There were even more servants around, as though they were deliberately acting out such liveliness. Following He Heng into the main hall, she saw the emperor and empress there as expected. The person sitting directly under was Jean and Princess Royal. Under Jean and Princess were He Yuan and Qin Bailu. Chu Qingju felt that the Rui Wang couple had come quickly this time and weren't too proud. After she finished her greeting with He Heng, they sat down opposite the couple of He Yuan. Chu Qingju, as usual, drank tea and lowered her head. Qing the emperor, as emperor, and as a father, he might not be a good one, but at the very least, he still followed social conventions. Sitting at the top, he very rarely looked at his two Erxifu, and only talked with his two sons. A quick while later, the Ning Wang couple arrived. Chu Qingju watched as the two sat above them and He Qi started to amuse the emperor. She couldn't help but think each imperial son was a master of flattery from birth. "Since your deity have all arrived, Jin will ask you one more time, do you really want to separate?" Qing the emperor gave a sigh. The old face showing tiredness, "Gui Nian, Jin shouldn't have given you in marriage to that boy of the Chao family. It has nothing to do with Fu Huang. It's knowing someone's face, not knowing their heart." Back then, it was this daughter that had agreed before Fu Huang decreed the marriage. Basically, it was this daughter who didn't have a good eye. Gui Nian, for, was Jean and Princess Royal's name. This name had been personally chosen by Qing the Emperor. Perhaps it was that when choosing this name, Qing the Emperor had thought that this daughter, even if she had married, still remembered this home of hers that was the palace, so he named her Gui Nian. Chu Qingju found that the emperor treated Jean and Princess very well, better than the three sons other than He Yuan. Maybe it was that Jean and Princess was his first child, that the feelings were different. These years, this daughter and the Count of Bailu were full of respect in and in harmony with each other. But now, the Count of Bailu's heart is not with I and the children any longer. He didn't even care about my identity and the old feelings as he involved himself with a 9th-grade official. He can humiliate this daughter, but he cannot humiliate the imperial family. Such a heartless man, what use would I keep him for? Separation, it would allow me to have clean days. Jean and Princess gave a bitter smile. Otherwise, if I forced myself to be with him, this daughter will feel disgust. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.